Welcome to the Easton School Committee meeting of Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. This is a Zoom meeting in accordance with the emergency order from Governor Charlie Baker to limit gatherings and maximize social distancing, and under legislation passed to address remote board meetings during the emergency declaration. This meeting will be conducted over Zoom. It will also be shown, it's being filmed by ECAT, which will be shown this week. And we're also on Facebook Live. And if you have a question during the session, to put your name and address in the Q&A, ask your question and we'll get to it. I think that's it. We do all votes by roll call. At this time, I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session, and we will return to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for the Easton Educators Association, Unit A. And in my opinion, having this discussion in open meeting would be detrimental to the bargaining position of the school committee. Do I have a second?
Wiseman, second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durance, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, so we're gonna be right back. Okay. All right, is everybody here? 1, 2. Okay, everybody's here. All right, welcome back to the school committee meeting of Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. And right now, number 4, possible vote to approve the MOA of Unit A. Do I have a motion to accept this MOA?
Star, so moved.
And do I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you very much. Minutes of September 3rd, 2020. Any comments, corrections? Anything you want to add, subtract? Go ahead, Caroline.
I just have a very minor correction on page 8. It's just my statement at the end of my little blurb. That it should be that will not be possible if people do not weigh their choices wisely. It kind of is contradictory the way it's stated. It says if people don't. Lynn, I don't know, Lynn, can you see where I'm talking about?
Are you at the top of the page, Caroline?
Unfortunately, because I have the screen on the Zoom. Let me see if I can. It's page 8.
About
And
10 lines, about 10 lines down.
right toward
on the
the end
printout.
of the paragraph that I was talking about, people making choices, weighing their choices. It's just the last sentence should be that will not be possible if people do not weigh their choices wisely. In other words, the way it's stated, it just says if people don't weigh their choices.
So
I
you
think.
want the words do not in front of weigh.
Right.
You want the words
not-
do not in front of
Right.
weigh.
If people do not, yes, that will not be possible if people do not. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
I'll defer to Jen there.
Yes, it does. Yes. Yep, that's where you want the insertion.
Anyone else? Comments, corrections, questions? Do I have a motion to accept these minutes?
O'Neill, so move with the correction.
Star,
Wiseman, second.
Okay, all those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. Next up, vote to approve amended music plan. Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. Chrissy, can you please see if Mr. Benson is present? So we have presented you with the music guidelines that the department chair of the music department, Mr. Benson, who's joining us, very thoughtfully put together to make sure that our students were protected, but still had the ability to enjoy music. And we, of course, want to make sure that we are preserving all of our core subjects, including the arts. There has since then been other guidance that has been provided by professional organizations. And so Mr. Benson has amended his recommended accommodations, and he's presenting that to you tonight just to keep you updated and for your information and input, of course, in our continued efforts to keep our students safe. And so I don't know if you would like him to present the salient points to you, or if you would like to ask him questions, but perhaps, as usual, Mr. Benson, perhaps you could explain where the new guidance came from, where you're drawing your research from, and then if you'd like to maybe note some salient points, and of course the committee can ask questions.
Sure, of course.
Thank
I did throw together some slides. I don't know if I'm allowed to present on this or if you guys
Sure.
even want to see them.
Chair DeLuca?
Can I do
Yep,
that?
that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, let's see. You know what? I don't think that I can because I don't believe I am. I think I would have to be a host.
Okay, we'll
to
take
do
care of that in 1 second.
Okay. Yes, this is my reliance on Google Meet. I'm a little,
You look at the bottom, Jeff, it says share screen. There's,
It's in green.
big green button. Yep. Thank you.
don't out yourself. No one else knows.
All right. I'm not going to be able to see you guys while I go through this though. So if you have any questions, please feel free to speak up. I'm on one screen. So we have the update on, the update on wind and brass instrument use as issued by the commissioner. And what this says is the department has updated its guidance for courses requiring additional safety considerations for fall 2020. When in-person school is occurring, wind and brass instruments may be used indoors or outdoors with 10 feet of distance in between individuals. And so obviously here the change is the move to indoors. And so, obviously with that recommendation, that's a game changer for us, but he doesn't really give too much background in terms of where they were coming from. Put together a little research for everybody just to kind of show the science behind why the commissioner is now saying that this is a move that we can make with safety. A study done by the National Center for Biotechnology Information in 2020 has actually gone to the trouble of using the contained practice room and instruments to measure aerosol emission by instrument. And the comparison was drawn to a speaking voice that's masked. So large instruments such as the tuba actually produce fewer aerosol emissions than a masked speaker, simply because the human body doesn't have the strength to push aerosols through the length of a closed tube of that size. Some other instruments with aerosol emissions equivalent to normal breathing and speaking would be instruments like piccolo, flute, bass, clarinet, French horn, and clarinet. And then the danger zone hits in trumpet, oboe, and trombone. And the oboe of all instruments, we have 2 oboists out of 100 band students at OA. Oboe is actually the worst. And you can see that here. So this is a graph out of a study done by the International Coalition of Performing Arts, the second round of the study, and they actually went and did aerosol readings right up against an instrument. So this is actually with no distance between the instrument that measures the aerosol spray and the bell of the instrument. And so you can see right here, this was playing a scale near a bell. The spike in the emissions is fairly pronounced. And then this is just ensemble playing near the bell. But then with a bell cover, which if you'll recall back to our outdoor plan for jazz band, with a bell cover, you can see down here, it reduces aerosol emission back to around the level of speaking with a mask. But that is also with no social distance between the instrument that measures the aerosol and the instrument itself. And so for us, this study was done with 1 layer of nylon material over the bell. At Oliver Ames, we are using MERV 13 filtration material, which we use 2 layers. 1 layer of MERV 13 filter material filters out 90% of particles between 1 and 3 microns and 75% of particles that range from 0.3 to 1 micron. So we're using 2 layers of that over our bells, which in theory would reduce aerosol emission more than the nylon material used in that study. Our flute players are using flute shields. You can see a picture of one here. And so this effectively blocks aerosol emission from flutes and piccolos. Just the nature of the instrument, it's not blown into, it's blown across. All of the particle emission occurs at the focal point of the embouchure right by their face. So by attaching these shields to the instrument, we're essentially negating aerosol spray from the flutes and piccolos. So, in addition to the 10 feet of distance, that's the minimum. We're not sharing materials. There's a concern with brass instruments because they have water keys that collect condensation. The governor is recommending disposable pads for the removal of any condensation. Realistically, our blocks are so short at the high school, we will have those available. Tempo has offered to buy those for us, but our rehearsal time won't really be long enough at the high school during the day for that to be an issue, but we'll have it covered. The kids will be masked when not playing, and we will be continuously updating our seating charts for contact tracing purposes. And actually, we measured out the auditorium with the largest cohort of band kids. We can actually get 10.5 feet of distance. So, if a COVID carrier and a healthy person with a mask we're both masked, 6 feet of social distancing. There's according to our EPS COVID FAQs, there's no risk of exposure at that point. So we're proposing to adhere to 10.5 feet in the auditorium while reducing emissions through the use of shields and bell covers down to the level of speaking. So in theory, negating any risk of transmission that way. And so I'd like to, let me stop that share. So, at the high school, this would allow us to return to curriculum in a way that, we're used to seeing for the band. At EMS right now and at RO, it's not really going to matter because of the scheduling, but what it would do if we can approve that going forward is allow us the flexibility should that become an option in their schedule to integrate that back in for those kids. So there wouldn't be an immediate impact, at the 4 through 8 level, but at the high school, it would allow us to return to a version of our normal programming, so to speak. So the proposal that I'm putting forward then is to add concert band to jazz band. So it would read concert band and jazz band in the updated document, and then it would add indoors, so indoors and outdoors with all of those guidelines in place.
Does anyone have any questions? Caroline?
So I know you've worked really hard on this, and I love that there are so many technical terms that are related to the study. I started to write down, but I looked down and didn't look up quickly enough. The name of the organization that was doing these studies with the instruments was the International what?
Oh, sorry. Let me call that back up.
Oh,
I've
sorry.
read some-
I started to write it down and I didn't do it quickly enough, and then it just flew out of my head.
No worries. I apologize. I was talking fast. Let me open that up on another screen.
Well,
Somewhere-
anyway, regardless, it's obviously a supportive organization for music programs. So this is, my poor committee is used to this by now. I'm on the one end of the spectrum in terms of caution and safety measures. And of course, what I want most of all is for our music students and their families to be safe. I very much want them to be able to enjoy their programs and to participate. I think it's, as Leisha mentioned, critically important that we offer those opportunities to kids if at all possible. But I do have a concern. First of all, it's all over the map in terms of the distancing, but the more recent studies I've seen have actually said 16 feet is indoors is more applicable than 10 feet. So that's for starters. But the second thing is that I can't remember where I saw this. I started to try to see it on my phone. It was just so small, but there are going to be slits in the masks. Is that correct?
No, we're not doing that. That's the recommendation from the commissioner. We're not going to do the slitted mask because that allows the opportunity for the kids when they remask
Right.
to leave that slit
Okay,
open.
so I apologize. I was conflating what I read from the commissioner with your presentation. So I apologize for
Right.
that. So the kids are able to play their instruments with the masks on?
No, and so that's going to work as in outside. So when I have it right here. So when we go to play, we're going like this, down, instrument right up. Then we play. When we're done playing, we go like this. So with the slitted
Okay.
mask, the idea is that you're open here, but when the kids stop playing, they'd have to remember to re-zip that. So I just, again, out of an abundance of caution, it's easier to remind them to put it up because they do that all day. whereas introducing the zippered mask across the middle is a whole nother, issue that we'd have to address.
Well, I don't disagree at all. I just, obviously, I feel like there's still going to be aerosol emitted if the mask is off the nose and mouth. I mean, even though you'll have an instrument in the mouth, you're still going to have kids breathing. Hopefully, they're not going to hold their breath for the entire piece. I don't want any kids fainting on you either.
No. The idea is when you're playing, the idea is inhaling only, right? And then we exhale through the instrument.
And that goes to the shields and the bell covers.
Correct.
Okay. Well, as I said, I do have a concern about the 10 feet. I think that, you have a group that's obviously interested in, making it possible for programs to continue. But based on, what I've been reading more recently, I think 10 feet is just not far enough indoors. Outdoors, it's fine. I mean, it's great. But indoors is kind of a different story. So I would like to tell you in advance that I'm totally impressed with all you've done. And I think you're doing a wonderful job. I mean, I hear wonderful things about you. I see it on Facebook everywhere, but I'm probably not going to, I will be outvoted by my committee, I assure you. But because I just feel so identified with being the person who's trying to take the most extreme cautionary position, I probably won't support the indoor part of this, which means the new program. So I apologize in advance because I know you've put your heart and soul in this, but don't worry, I'll be out. I'm sure I'll be outvoted.
I completely understand your position.
Thank you.
Any other question? Michelle, go ahead.
I don't have a question. It's a comment. I'm extremely impressed with the amount of time and research that you've put into this, and the science behind it. And I know how you guys operate on a normal basis, and that's always with extreme caution. And I think that you have enough safeguards in place with the padding, with the little guard. I've never even seen that. That wouldn't have thought of that. I agree. I think the up and down is something that they're used to, and it's probably like rote memory by now, as opposed to, and I think also zippers can become problems in other classes if it's a mask that they're wearing for the day. But I personally am very comfortable with the plan that you have in place for indoors. So I just like to say.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so at this time, let's take our vote. I'm going to make a motion to accept the amended music plan as proposed by Jeff Benson. Do I have a second?
Second, Durant?
All those in favor?
Neil, regrettably, no.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Dar, yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Benson,
Thank you.
good luck. Keep everybody safe.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
All right, next we have, okay. Vote to appoint a voting delegate and alternate delegate to the MASC Delegate Assembly. Dr. Cabral.
Okay, so you have the option as members of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to appoint a delegate and an alternate who would have voting rights on MASC. The MASC, not mask, like we were just talking about. You had originally expressed your interest in having Nancy serve that role with Jackie as an alternate. However, an actual vote needs to be taken and reflected in the minutes. So if you can either discuss to reconsider your choices or just go right to a motion, we do need you to take a vote on whomever you're going to appoint as the delegate and as the alternate.
So Jackie, I put your name down because they said put an alternate down, so I didn't even discuss this with anybody.
Yeah, I was like, what?
What happened?
I don't know, I was
But-
trying to figure out when we talked about this too.
Yeah, this year the meeting is virtual anyway. It's not, I mean, previous years, I think it's been down on Cape Cod. So, but if anybody else would like to be the delegate or the alternate, please, you're more than, I signed up to be delegate and I put Jackie in as alternate because she has nothing else to do.
I mean, I'm happy to do it. If there's somebody who has a really burning desire to do it, I'm happy to let them do it as well. So.
Anybody? Okay. All right. Bueller? All right.
I'm sure you'll represent us well.
All right. So thank you. And Jackie too. So, okay. So I will make a motion. All right. I'll just put, make a motion that Nancy DeLuca is the voting delegate to the MASC Delegate Assembly and Jackie Wiseman is the alternate delegate to the MASC Delegate Assembly.
O'Neill second.
All those in
I'm
favor?
just so relieved that there hadn't been a whole conversation that I
I know,
blacked out
right?
on.
Caroline,
We just received the form with the
Anyway,
delegate and the alternate, so
I
we.
know.
O'Neill, yes.
Good thing we needed a vote because you wouldn't have even known.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes. Okay.
Durant, yes?
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
All right, thank you. All right, number 8, discussion on donors choose. I think it's donor's choice, but that's all right. I think that's what I told her. With possible vote to revise policy JJE. So I'm just going to begin this by saying I had an email a while back this summer from a teacher, and I had spoken with her and said that it was our position that fundraising, went by the policy JJE. And we had talked a while back, I think at one of our meetings, about the fact that there are so many things that teachers use and need. I think one of Dr. Cabral's concerns was and there's nothing wrong with donor's choice or donor's choose, I'm sorry, but teachers need to ask their principals first, because sometimes the things that they need, we can either get or we have or whatever. But like last year, Kristen Foote from Center School came to the school committee and asked and made a presentation about getting the little math thing she was looking for and uses those through Donors Choose. So that's where we're at. And I guess what we're trying to look at is, do we want to change the policy if it's okay to use Donors Choose to, let our teachers have more accessibility to what's out there. In fact, in one of the emails I got, she said there's a lot of companies out there that are willing to, give you whatever you want, but you got to pay up a little bit. And these teachers are paying for things out of their own pockets all the time.
So just to elaborate a little from the district perspective, we did not get involved with this prior, and the school committee actually brought to our attention that you were interested in discussing it because you were wondering why the department didn't buy certain things for teachers. The things that years ago, I honestly can't remember what it was, that were asked for in Donors Choose, we absolutely could have gotten. And so the only concern, if you will, that might even be too strong of a word, that we had as central administration was, if we know about a need from a teacher and we can provide it faster, we would like to do that, as opposed to having the teacher either have to go through this process or not be able to ultimately get it at all. And there were also reported to me anyway, because this is before I was superintendent, it was reported to me that there were a couple of times where teachers were getting and using materials that were in place of materials that the curriculum at the time, curriculum coordinator had worked on with the district, or however they did it, for them to use. So it was the school committee's position to write a policy about it, and the policy did say that it would go, school committee chose to have it go through you, so that you could consider it or approve it or deny or what have you. And we have had it happen successfully, and that is great. We certainly support resources and materials for teachers, and we don't want to make it an impediment for them to get them. So this is your policy. So whatever you would like to do with it is obviously entirely up to you, and we will gladly reinforce whatever you would like.
Michelle, go ahead.
Well, as a teacher, I know Donors Choose is a wonderful resource, and often can even be community type partnerships for materials and resources or whatever. It's only limited to the imagination of that teacher. My concern when I first brought it up is the red tape aspect of, you see a need, you have something coming up in the near future that you need something for, and to have to wait for a school committee meeting or a space on an agenda to present, and then go into, it's a process because you have to do a whole write-up and submit a proposal onto the computer, and then it goes out to potential donors who can fund whatever amount of that they want to. And then once it's approved, the materials themselves arrive, as opposed to giving the teacher the money. So it's controlled in that sense. I just think that I can't see any reason why a building administrator wouldn't be able to screen those. I would assume that they would have the district's interest in mind. I mean, I can't think of, we have fantastic administrators and I fully trust them, and it would cut weeks to maybe even a month off the process for a teacher.
Thank you, Michelle. Jen.
Dr. Cabral, do you think, I agree with Michelle's sentiments, do you see any instances where building level administration wouldn't have enough information to make a decision, that do you feel strongly that you might have some insight into a supplier or a resource that maybe isn't known at the building level? I certainly don't think it needs to come to the school committee. But, I trust that administration can make that. I think we just need to figure out where the right level is. I'm thinking building as well, but would like your insight on.
So as the leader of curriculum instruction in the district, Chrissy Pruitt certainly could work with principals on anything like that internally. She does bring the district perspective. We do have some community partners. For example, we meet with FEE. If there were some sort of technology, we could let FEE know about it. It's just a matter of getting the word out to other organizations that might be able to help as well. But between Mrs. Pruitt and the building administrators, I don't foresee an issue other than the school committee not participating in that decision-making process.
Caroline?
Funny, when this came up, I really asked myself, why on earth did we even put ourselves in the loop? So, it doesn't make sense. And I agree with Michelle, the building administrator seems to be the most logical first step. But I also agree with Jen and Leisha. I think that having Chrissy in the loop is important, just because you don't want to have someone go to all that effort if there are other resources that are more readily available and are just kind of waiting, and we certainly, well, Leisha, you mentioned FEE, but also, for example, we have wonderful resources being provided to us by a fantastic organization like Raising Multicultural Kids. So I could see a teacher, so well-meaning, thinking I would love to, enhance my curriculum in the area of social justice or whatever, but not being necessarily aware that there is a resource that's just, you know, kind of waiting in the wings to provide those kinds of supports. So I think, is there a way to articulate it that it would be the building administrator, but, you know, for any kind of substantial request or whatever, that maybe that Chrissy would be charged with the final approval, or
Or
how would that be stated? So we don't want to put the teachers to any more trouble than they have to go through already, but yes.
Okay, well, Chrissy or Alicia, before you answer, Jackie, I think you want to say something.
Well, yeah, no, I completely agree with everything that was said. I'm not sure why we're in the loop for this either. Maybe something like, you know, going to the building administrator and in consultation with the curriculum coordinator, something like that. So it's, you know, the building administrator could just check with Chrissy to see if we have whatever resources the teacher's looking for, or, you know, we have a specific person that's been very quick in getting what they are asking for, something like that. But yeah, I don't see any reason why we need to be in the loop for this. It doesn't make sense.
Michelle.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware, it's not just for curriculum things, donor choose. I mean, you could be making a library center and you may just need like comfy chairs and I don't know, or whatever, but it can be physical things. You might need little whiteboards and markers or something. It's not necessarily curriculum. You might want a certain book series or something, but I'm not sure that I've ever seen anybody buy curriculum per se.
And the other thing in her email too, because I think this is a pre-K to 2 teacher, you know, she wanted to get a play kitchen and creative play supplies, which, like the mini whiteboards and markers, I think the school department has those, but they probably don't have play kitchens and, you know, the play stuff for the little ones. So that's what she's talking about in terms of her donors choose. Chrissy, go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to say that I'm very happy that you're revisiting this. As a former teacher and principal, Donors Choose was very important in my life. And when I was a principal, I was the one that oversaw the proposals that came out. And it was, you know, mostly just to ensure that we didn't have, for example, one of my teachers wanted an easel, and it was like this glamped out easel, and we wanted to make sure that there wasn't another easel in the district, right? And so that was something that I was able to work on with other principals. And I think that, you know, of course, I'll be there to support the principals, and I feel like I work closely enough with them that if they have any questions, they will definitely talk to me about them. But I think that our principals are really well equipped to handle this. They are very knowledgeable of what the needs are within the classrooms, and also what needs we have within our district as well. Like I said, you know, and Michelle, thank you for pointing that out, because I had teachers using it to get comfy seating. I had teachers using it for specific art materials, or easels to do painting and bring things. We actually did it also. Our phys ed teacher did it for extra recess equipment. You know, there's many opportunities to use this, and there are companies that just match what teachers are asking for. So it is a great resource. So I just wanted to share that 2 cents, and thank you for relooking at this. I think that this will be a great, fantastic resource for our teachers, and I'm very, very hopeful.
I would echo that and add something. So yes, when I was teaching, I used this with a journalism class actually to get some digital cameras for our reporters, things like that, sort of what's considered the extras sometimes. What I do want to make sure is that we don't in any way, and I know nobody here has said that, and I know nobody here intends it, but I just want to punctuate it. The reason we have the principals and perhaps Chrissy participate, not necessarily approve or disapprove in any way, is because we have had a couple issues in the past which has caused problems for teachers, and we just want to get ahead of those. So for example, different pieces of technology have been ordered and then weren't compatible with our system. And they were very disappointed about that. And that's an easy check. We can find out for them. That's not even an extra step they have to take. We had some teachers who received generous donations, and then the fire department, doing their due diligence, came through the buildings and had it all removed because it wasn't to our applicable fire codes. I wouldn't expect a teacher to know that. You know, they know a lot and they know a lot about fire codes even, but certain materials, you know, we can investigate those types of things for them. What we don't want to do is have them waste any time or resources when perhaps a slight adjustment could get them something better that they're looking for. It's not that we don't trust them to choose what they need for their classroom. That is definitely not the intention. Again, it's to make sure, hey, somebody's getting rid of that at the secondary level, you can use that at the elementary, or something that even maybe a building principal wouldn't know. It's simply meant to augment the experience for teachers, not to somehow slow them down or dissuade them from taking advantage of something like this.
Okay,
So,
so
Do we
next
want to?
question is then, when we go in, see, do we have to write something in there, or can we just leave donors choose as a building by building effort in association with the principal and Mrs. Pruitt?
You do have some things in your policies that you direct to the building level. For example, even in the fundraising policy, certain things about the PTO, PTA, you allow the building principal. So I think this would be the same nature. You would just amend the wording slightly to organizations like, and I think if memory serves, you have a couple of organizations listed as not just Donors Choose, but things like it. You could say would be at the discretion of the building in consultation with Mrs. Pruitt, and I think that would be fine. Instead of striking the whole
Okay.
thing from the policy,
Right.
it just offers a little more information for somebody who might be looking for it, and then they would know where to go.
Okay, thank you. Jen, you had something?
Yeah, I was just asking, do we want to do we want to talk about proposed wording now and vote, or is this something that will come back next time?
Well, that's why I was asking about the
Yeah.
wording of
Yeah.
so, I mean, if we're changing the policy, the wording in the policy, then we have to reword it and vote on the policy. But if it's just something that's already in there that, I mean, we could add Donors Choose in there, like just add those words with, oh, right here.
It is in there. Yeah.
Yeah. We could just add the words in there and and we could vote on it tonight, right?
Well, there's a clause in there that specifically prohibits the use of online fundraising, and he uses GoFundMe as an example there, which frankly I agree with. I don't like GoFundMe for this type of thing. I think Donors Choose is a much better example of something that's really designed for education.
Mhm.
I agree.
Okay,
So I think it would be confusing to leave that bullet as is.
right. So maybe that's exactly where it needs to go. The use of online fundraising sites such as GoFundMe and some of the sites is prohibited. That, and then without specific approval for, okay, then add another sentence in there that says teachers in association with the building principal and the assistant superintendent are allowed to use Donors Choose. No, Caroline, go ahead.
Could I
Correct me.
just substitute educators for teachers, because we have
Yep,
counselors and so
Sure.
forth that may make use of it as well.
sure.
Educators, I'm sorry, Caroline, were you going to make a recommendation?
Caroline, what are you gonna fix that I said?
Well, you said in association, I guess consultation or
Okay.
might be better than,
Okay,
but I just want to make sure, I think, excuse me, I think we still have to vote twice, or we have to, I mean, this is a first reading. I don't think we vote tonight. I think we have to vote next time. Is that correct?
If it's a policy change, you need to have a second reading and vote.
okay.
I mean, it's kind of a pain for something this small, but yeah.
Jackie,
So policy subcommittee person, Nancy DeLuca. So maybe
Yes,
we
Jackie,
can
right.
just tweak the language and then at the next meeting, vote on it. And, you know,
Do
that
the
way we don't
second
have to
reading
do
and
it right
vote.
now. And
Perfect.
But Donors
Perfect.
Choose is
Thank you.
an internet site as well, right? So we need to find a way not to be creating
Yeah,
conflict
I think we
between
do
those
need
two
to
senses. Yeah.
delineate between something like that versus something like GoFundMe, which has really
Sure.
high fees and it's just
Right.
cash coming
Right.
to you. And yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so Jackie and I will have that ready for the next meeting.
Great.
Great.
All right, everybody, thank you. And I think that makes the teachers feel better that, you know, they know that they have that resource if needed as we move along. Thank you, everybody. Okay, number 9, discussion and possible vote on field trip activity participation for remote students. Dr. Cabral.
Okay, thank you. So as we are getting into the school year, we are opening up different activities for students. Very, very baby steps here, but we are having things, for example, NRT, you know that we have a contract with them. Instead of having them come into the classroom, we're really limiting virtually all of that this year. And so they have agreed to provide some online services for teachers, but also some field trips. And they are working on collaborating with the conservation that has the land behind both the middle school and the high school and Richardson Olmsted there. And so they are looking to do walks through the conservation land and so forth as part of the educational programming. We encourage that, of course, with social distancing and masking, and the teachers would be involved and the fact that it's outdoors. However, of course, this brings up new questions in the age of COVID and having remote students. That's just one example, but for that example, we realize that it is something that could perhaps be a very valuable experience for our remote learners. However, you did vote to have students who are remote participate in sporting events and activities, but we did not include field trips. We didn't really think we were going to have any field trips. This is based on our collaboration and Chrissy Pruitt's work with the NRT and recreating the delivery of their instruction. And so it is an opportunity for our students to get outside and continue this science programming. But the question before you is if you feel comfortable having remote students who are interested in participating, come and participate in these types of field trips with the hybrid students. They would unfortunately need to provide their own transportation because we don't have transportation at these different times during the day and we don't have the buses or drivers available for it. However, we feel as though we can accommodate the students. Certainly we don't know how many it would be, but based on the size of the cohorts right now, we believe we're able to do that. However, we realize we did not include it in the language that talked specifically about sports and extracurricular activities. So this is for your consideration. I don't know if you view this as very similar or something different, if you had any questions or discussion on the item.
Jackie?
actually, my son's classroom was talking about this today because they are going on a field trip walk in the woods. I completely support this. I mean, I agree that we can't provide transportation and it's of course up to the families, the parents of the remote students, but I think it's a great way to, you know, since they're in a classroom anyway, to have them with their classmates and have them participate in something that they're going to be talking about in the classroom. And if they haven't had that experience, it's going to be, they're going to miss out on it. So I completely support it.
Michelle?
I also support it. I do have I'm trying to logistically understand it in my head. So these are the students that are all remote, correct?
Correct.
So when you think about the stable pods, how would they be joining? I guess the logistics of it is what I'm asking about.
Okay, so we will split it up by cohorts, but I will actually let Chrissy Pruitt explain it because I'm sort of jumping into her area, and since she's here, I'm sure she can do a fabulous job.
No, so there's a few instances where this is popping up. One is actually with the NRT, the other is actually with music. Mr. Benson had shared that he'd like to have an outdoor performance, and some of the fully remote students he would like to include in that. And so that's one instance. So it's outside, everyone would be very well, spread out. But just because he said it would be really encouraging if the kids could be together to hear them performing together, and it would kind of give them that extra boost, and just, encourage them even more. The NRT, the students, it would only be outside, it would not be inside. And so therefore we have the physical space to be distanced. And that is where Mr. Getchell and the NRT actually walked the path. They have approval from the Conservation Association already to utilize that land. And Mr. Getchell isn't even sure necessarily if the remote families would be interested, but he really wanted to throw that out there to them to see if this is something that they would want to participate in. It's when we have an opportunity like this where they can join their classmates, because we know that many of our remote students, while of course it's up to the parents and their choice, some of them don't necessarily feel like they're a part of the classroom yet, and so this would really help with that. Although I do have to say I've seen some incredible inclusion going on in classrooms, which I'll talk about in my update, but I just think it would be a really nice opportunity and especially since it's outside, the risk is much lower and the distancing can occur.
And we want to acknowledge that we understand there are many different reasons for people to choose for their students to work remotely. And of course, we support every one of them. But some of them have to do with the fact of the students being indoors. And so they may feel differently about being outside, and we just want to give them the opportunity to exercise that choice since the circumstances are changed a little bit as opposed to being in the classroom.
Would the parents be dropping them off and picking them
Yes,
up?
the parents would have to provide transportation because unfortunately we don't have
But
that.
they wouldn't be staying.
Well, they could stay, but they wouldn't be able to participate in the field trip. They could stay in their car, for example, and
Okay.
That's up to them, but they do not participate in the field trip, no.
Any other questions, Caroline?
Well, I just wanted to mention that, COVID aside, outdoor education itself is such a wonderful component of any comprehensive curriculum. So I think this is just a wonderful idea, and kudos to all of the people that are thinking of these creative ways to, as you all mentioned, bring the kids together in, for each class, but also it's really a form of enrichment that we sometimes just forget about, the outdoor educational component. So that's wonderful.
It's hard to believe, but there are some silver threads that we're finding throughout this COVID process that may change practices in the future for the better. This is one of them.
Jen, you had a question?
Yeah, so it sounds like this is sort of triggered by a specific plan that I'm guessing began with RO. Can you talk about what the thinking is around being able to make this equitable for Parkview Center, Moreau? What are we looking at in terms of, the facilities that are available for the two other schools that don't have access to the town forest?
So what's happening with what NRT is providing is their regular field trips, but they will be virtual. This is an added enrichment program that they're actually offering us, which has been great. They're also offering enrichment that will be done in the afternoons for a particular grade. They have a certain amount of spots so we're going to be targeting like one school on this day, another school on another day. So to get all of them, all of the students participating, but their NRT has been great. We're also looking at potentially because right now, the way that the schedule works, third through sixth, they kind of go first in the NRT. So that's more immediate, where the younger grades go in the spring. So we're hoping that, because right now NRT has a limited amount of students that can actually be there. We're hoping that by the spring, that will open up a little bit more, and that we would be able to actually go to NRT with our classes. So
Okay.
we're going to relook at this plan and obviously see what can be done. But if we need to provide transportation for the other schools too, because obviously Parkview can access that land, but if we need to provide transportation for the other schools to utilize that land because they don't have the limitations on numbers, then we can definitely look at that if that is the only option. Obviously NRT is the most ideal space, but
Right.
not
It's
sure, yeah.
like
So
right
in
across the
terms
street
of-
from Moreau. So you'd
Right,
think they'd be able to
exactly.
do that. And then, Center School could maybe be a walk down to that Gill property that's not
Right.
too far away on.
Right. The NRT
on
has
Depot
been
Street.
wonderful to work
Okay.
with, and they are thinking outside the box.
Mhm.
They have been planning. They actually met with us and booked us first because of our wonderful partnership and relationship with them, to make sure that we were getting all of our needs met, and just to continue that partnership. And it's fun because the two teachers that that work with our students, they miss our kids so much and they kept saying, we just want to be back with the kids. So
Aw.
it'll be great. We're very, very fortunate to have their partnership here in town.
Awesome.
So this particular field trip is not inequitable between the grade bands, between, PK to 2, because it's not that Parkview's going and the other two are not.
Right.
This is
Okay.
for Richardson Olmsted and perhaps grade 6. When we do have the PK to 2, they will all do the same thing. It's not as problematic to transport students from one destination to one destination, like from Center School to NRT or Center School to the conservation land. The remote student issue is we'd have to go literally around town to pick up students, and it's that we don't have the transportation for, because it has to fall within our traditional runs. So, a 10-minute run is a lot different than having to go around town to pick up students. So that will always be equitable when we offer the programming to the students in school. It's just that unfortunately under the current model, we can't transport the remote students, but we would always transport our own students for those short trips during the school day in between runs.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion to accept that remote students be allowed to attend field trips and activities?
O'Neill,
Wiseman,
so moved.
Sorry, Caroline.
O'Neill, shall I second or?
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
Luca, yes?
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, October 1st enrollment, Dr. Cabral.
So we have, as we do every year, we've provided you with the October 1st enrollment, and it has the last 2 school years for comparison purposes. I don't think you will see anything entirely surprising here. What you will notice is that the pre-K numbers have gone down more than they have in past years, as have the kindergarten numbers, neither of which is compulsory in Massachusetts. So under the current pandemic situation, you of course have people who may feel uncomfortable about having their children in a public school setting, especially if it is the first time they're in a public school setting. And we have a lot more students moving from full day kindergarten to half day, full day kindergarten to half day kindergarten. So these are all things that have been reported to you so far. These numbers verify or validate the information. You will see that as the grades increase, you tend to have more students. And again, I would just remind you that when you're looking at it, so for example, if you take a look at the row across for grade 7, there are 268 students currently enrolled, and 310 were in grade 7 last year. What you should not do is do a longitudinal comparison that way. What you want to do is look at the cohort moving through the district. So if you look at grade 6 for FY20 and then look down and to the left at grade 7 for FY21, you see that really there's only a 9 student difference. That's much more common. And some go up 10, down 5, up 4. That happens every single year. But the biggest decreases you will see here are pre-KK. It was entirely predictable. We know why. In fact, this is very common across the Commonwealth right now, to the point that they are working with the legislature to try to make sure that the numbers this year do not have a detrimental impact on Chapter 70 funding next year. Because again, across the Commonwealth, all districts are seeing this bump, this declining bump, particularly in kindergarten and pre-K. And as we know, per student expenditure plays a big role in what we receive for Chapter 70 funding. So that can't be done without legislative intercession, excuse me. So they are looking to either pause the FY20 numbers, come up with some sort of calculation that takes into account the dip because of, the COVID dip. We don't have further information on that yet, but they are actively collecting that information from us. Chrissy just sent a report to DESE, in fact, that gave some very specific information about the declining enrollment this year as opposed to past years. And so they're looking at different ways to do this. There is not a suggestion yet on how they're going to do it, but it is something they're looking very closely at, because basically every community is concerned about this and its potential implications for funding next year. So we will definitely keep you up to date on that. But those are the reasons for the decline that you see, and what they are working on right now to try to mitigate the impact.
And
Any
I'll also
questions?
just tell you that in the report that I sent, that our biggest change is kindergarten. That's the biggest change for us. Kindergarten enrollment, sorry.
Right. Well, maybe at the end of this year, when we get our budget together in the spring, we're going to have free full-day kindergarten. That would have made a difference. But that's another pothole to go through.
It would have made a difference. You're right.
It would have made a difference. All right. Any questions? Okay, we don't need to vote. We just have information. Thank you very much. Okay, next. Now, people at home that are watching that would like to ask questions, please type in your name and address, and you can enter a question into the Q&A, and we will get to it, because public comment is right after it. But if Chrissy sees that a question is relative to Dr. Cabral's presentation, then she can fit it in there. All right, Dr. Cabral, district update.
Okay, so I would say maybe there are 2 major buckets for the update this evening. The first is in looking ahead. Obviously, we can't predict what is going to happen in the next few months. If we are taking our cue from national and international forecasts, we do see that within the next 6 to 12 weeks is predicted to be the pinnacle of the pandemic, literally worldwide, since its beginning last February, March. It remains to be seen if that will be the case here. Certainly, I don't know if people are following the state maps for our communities. Easton is green once again. We are in a sea of yellow and red around us. We are seeing that that's the case in our schools as well. I credit the community, as I said in a recent correspondence, with their commitments to this social responsibility to one another, because it really can be seen as a result of the efforts of people both in school but also outside of school. And so we want to make sure that no one looks at that out of context, that they just look at Easton and see green, yellow, green, 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 and perhaps become complacent. That isn't what we want to do. We want to look at us in relation to our community neighbors and truly across the state. We want to make sure we look at trends. Europe, of course, provided a very useful trend for us, a very reliable trend marked for us last year. We followed very closely to their numbers, and it seems as though we may again. And so it is important to take a look even at our counterparts overseas. So we are using many metrics, of course, in our decision making in the district, but I just want to really thank everyone for their vigilance, but encourage them to continue because I believe it is making a difference. The issues for us, we have to try to notify people of any potential changes, of any adjustments as soon as possible, because this has major impacts on family dynamics, on honestly whether parents are able to work, for childcare issues, even for our older students being able to have part-time jobs or care for younger siblings. So we realize that the impact on staff and students whenever there's a change is certainly important. It's critical, it's relevant. And so we want to provide as much information as we can. Again, that we are looking at those indicators to predict, much like a meteorologist would use many tools and longitudinal data to predict, but we of course know, especially in New England, what happens to a lot of those predictions. We're doing the best we can, of course, but we have to have contingency plans in place. So for example, we have the next step in our plan is to allow parents to express their interest in students returning to school if they are fully remote, express that interest in December for a January start. Now that's very important for parents to start planning at this point. What we're seeing is we are not and of course, we didn't know this summer, and we won't know this by January until it gets a lot closer. But we have not seen a change in some recommendations from the sources we are using for this information. For example, the CDC is still recommending 6-foot social distancing. Many of our colleagues across the state have followed the Department of Education and the DPH's guidance of 3 to 6 foot social distancing. We were very cognizant of choosing 6 feet. We wanted to work out of an abundance of caution. We've gone above and beyond, honestly, every safety measure that we've put in place. We're not sorry we've done that. We think that's also contributed to our successful suppression of spread in the schools at this point. However, we do know that people are anticipating coming back in January. Something that's very important, and we've also gotten many calls, questions from people about having their students who are in cohort A or B participate in both cohort A and B. We've also had several remote parents reach out to us and say, can you take my child before January? We really don't want to wait that long. We're happy about that. Of course, we want our students to come back. We are taking that as a sign that parents are more comfortable with the plans that we have in place and that their students are ready to come back. They're adjusted. However, we do not have the space right now to do that, except for very extreme cases where the professionals in the school, counselors, crisis team, classroom teacher, recommend that a student come in because they have a significant concern about a lack of growth, whether academically or social emotionally. We also followed the guidelines of the Commissioner of Education to allow students of other public school teachers to come to school. We did enter into agreements with other districts that had our teachers in their district. We realized very quickly that we couldn't open school for any students if our staff were unable to come to school. And so it was a trade-off. We did allow some families to have their students come on both cohorts. We've actually shut that down at this point. And so we do have requests from educators in other districts, but we're really reserving those spaces for our students most at need because they're at a premium right now. What we are concerned about and what we really need to discuss and consider for January is if we want to welcome back remote students. And at this point, we already know there are many that want to come back. We would not be able to do that unless we restricted our social distancing to 5 or 4 or even 3 feet. We are not recommending that at this point, but it is something that you need to be aware of, and that parents need to be aware of, because we don't know where we will be in January. This could be a moot point either way. Miraculously, there's a vaccine and things are lifted and we could do it no problem. Or the more likely scenario, schools are shut down or close to being shut down. We have a great many concerns about the holidays coming up, the number of people that we know that have expressed that they're going to be traveling, going out of state, going out of country. And so we don't know if there will be a lot of people who are out of school because they are quarantining, for example. And if that's the case, I don't see us confidently relaxing our social distancing requirement. However, it is the DPH and DESE's guidance that 3 to 6 feet is perfectly acceptable. As I said, many schools do that, and we have seen the data is showing that schools are not indicated as super spreaders. We probably have the safest protocols in place over businesses, certainly supermarkets, doctors' offices even. We don't see air purifying systems in every single space, for example. We don't see the strict 6-foot social distancing that we're using. So we just have even the deep cleaning. We have many things in place that are making it really a much safer environment than other public places. So I just put that out there. I don't know that there's actually a decision to be made this evening, but it is very important because January will be here before we know it. And certainly if parents are thinking about or even planning on having their children come back to school in January, we're going to need some guidance from the school committee about what you're going to want to do about the 6-foot social distancing, because again, we are allowed to go down to 3. What I've asked the principals to do is give me an account of, so we have a master document right now of every classroom in the district. So every school, across the district, and how many desks they can fit, what is their student capacity with 6-foot social distancing. We have asked the principals to go back, and we also had 3-foot social distancing because we did that exercise for you when you were deciding on what the social distancing would be in our plan. We have had them go back and tell us what is it going to be if it's 5-foot social distancing. So in other words, will that 1 foot make a big difference? In some classrooms, it may be a difference of 2 desks. In another, it might be a difference of 6 desks. Obviously, it's a matter of scale. So the more desks you have in a classroom, every foot that you can restrict that creates space for a lot more desks. So they're going through that exercise now. I don't have those numbers for you this evening. We will at some point be asking parents if they are requesting for their students to come back in January. I just need to put out there that it's not necessarily a given. If for whatever reason we are still open and we decide to still have 6-foot social distancing, that is going to severely restrict the number of students that we can have back in the classroom. The other thing for you to consider is the people that we do have going A and B. I would not recommend that you restrict high needs students to one cohort or the other. In fact, it is the directive from the commissioner that they are in 5 days a week, and there's a very good reason for that. However, these accommodations that we have made for teachers of other districts, for example, or for even our own staff, which would be problematic in other ways, but I have to put it out there. If you restricted them to one cohort or the other, that would conceivably free up some spaces for remote students to be on one cohort or the other. So they wouldn't be in for a full 4 days. So these are just things that we have to put out before you. They're things that we're thinking about. We think you and the public need to be aware that these are possibilities going forward. We have been thinking about things like I told you before, staff had asked us about full days. We investigated that. It really wasn't going to work out. I know it seems like a very cut and dry thing to parents, but it really isn't that easy to just add the 2 hours on the day. Yes, for example, pre-K to 2 does have lunch in school. However, the way we've set it up, all of the classrooms have facilitators. Well, those facilitators are service providers. And so we had to really upend everyone's schedule to make that work, which means if we were to increase, we had to decrease specials, for example. We had to go from 40 minutes to 20 minutes so that those teachers could help in facilitation. If we were to go back to the regular schedule, specials would need to go from 20 to 40 minutes again, which means many teachers would lose their facilitators. That's something we have not figured out how to do just yet. So there are ripple effects that I'm well aware people do not know about, but we do need to emphasize that it's certainly not a simple answer. If it were a simple answer, I can assure you we would have already done it. There's always something in there that makes it much more complicated. Another issue is that right now, every teacher goes 4.5 hours straight in the morning, but then they have their lunch and they have a contractual prep period that they very much need. In the regular schedule, those are all throughout the day. And so again, that changes schedules, that changes who's available for facilitation, that changes how much time they have for a prep period every day. There are many, both contractual and operational and situational issues that crop up with just adding those 2 hours to the day. It actually makes a big difference because we're adding 2 hours in a very different atmosphere. We didn't have facilitators before, for example. Now we have staff doing double duty, doing all these different jobs throughout the day. And in order to do that, we had to make adjustments to their schedules. So to go back would limit our ability to reallocate the staff as we have now. That's just a few of the issues. So, you know, we are considering everything, of course. And if people found that they were, if people found that they were, you know, they have suggestions or they have some feedback, we're taking all of it. But if they find that they're being ignored because they're not being implemented, that's definitely not true. We're investigating everything, but then, you know, when we look through all of the details, we find that some are just not as possible as others if we want to keep providing remote learning into the classroom, if we want to keep providing facilitators to help teachers, if we want to keep providing the prep periods that our teachers are contractually able to have and that we want them to have. It's just, it seems silly that it should be so complicated, but it is. And we have a lot of smart people working on it. And so we're going to continue to investigate every idea, but you know, please don't feel as though your suggestions are disregarded because maybe we're not doing it just yet. There are a lot of considerations. So that's maybe the first sort of big issue. I don't know if anybody has questions about that or discussion or anything.
Sorry, Nancy, I could see you mouth my name.
I was muted. Jen.
Do we have a ballpark of, and I know it's not evenly distributed, but how many students, like per, let's use elementary classroom, we would expect to have to try to find room for if they were to return from fully remote? I'm doing like kind of a back of the envelope calculation. I know there were 15% fully remote. So that's like 3 to 4 kids per classroom if we have 24 kids in a class.
Yeah, well, again, it's not as nicely easily distributed as that because some grades, for example, have more than other grades. So in one class, you know, you could have a first grade teacher who has 9 kids who are remote learners. And then next door, you could have a teacher that has 2 kids who are remote learners. Mm-hmm. So it's really different in every classroom. We did try to go through and look at kindergarten and first grade and say, you know, do we have the opportunity to have all of the students in? We had a couple of classrooms where it was possible. It wasn't possible universally. We have one school where we're looking at or we've been asked to look at the kindergarten students being in the room, but again, it's not equitable. It would be very nice if it were 3 across the board, but it doesn't fall that way at all. It's all over the place. And so, and of those, we don't know how many are looking to come back. That we have set up for December for a January start, because we thought that would give us enough time, because it involves a tremendous amount of planning.
Right. Yeah.
You know, we thought at the time it may involve transportation changes, which it will, furniture, which it will. We're going to need to purchase more furniture. However, what we didn't anticipate was, you know, we were hoping that we would be down to 4 or 5 feet by then, but you know, that we're not seeing that changing imminently. So that is an extra consideration at this point. And we do need to consider, we talked about it as a leadership team, you know, do we have the 1 or 2 classrooms here or there that can take all the students back, do it, and not have that in other places? We're still teasing through those things, trying to gather the data. Well, what does it mean? Is it really 1 or 2 classrooms, or is it all except 1 or 2? Or is it, you know, we're finding more often than not, it's the majority of classrooms, we don't have space for everybody.
Okay.
I mean, they weren't designed for kids to sit 6 feet apart, of course.
Right. And I would imagine that, I mean, not that we have the funding to hire more staff, but would imagine that we will be looking at things like, you know, is there another space in the building that could be used if we could find a staff person to cover that space? It would mean changing the classroom that the kids have been in
Right.
remotely,
No,
which would be lousy, but
we have a couple of spaces. Obviously, the pre-K to 2 classrooms are far more limited. And right now, the largest spaces are really the only ones we can rely on in emergency situations. So we really don't want to tie them down with a classroom being in there regularly. If we needed to evacuate a space or a couple of spaces, and it is inclement, or it's because of the weather that we're having to do it, we really don't have any place except our couple of large spaces in the elementary schools. So we are trying to reserve those. However, as you said, if we start branching out and using other spaces, we're talking about needing more staff. And we have $0 for more staff, none whatsoever. We cut 30-something positions last year, which is hurting us even more. So that's a challenge there for sure.
yeah. Okay.
Jackie?
Okay, so I a couple of different things. I'm not really sure how to say any of this, but with regard to the spacing, I mean, I am interested to hear what the data is when the principals look at the different spacing levels in the classrooms. It kind of makes me nervous to think about reducing the space, as you said, at this time, because this is kind of the time when you would expect the rates to go up because, you know, of everyone being inside, because of the weather and because of the holidays and because of the traveling. So I'm not sure this would be the right time to do that, but you know, I'm still kind of thinking about it because I also know how important it is to get as many kids back as we can. With the schedules, the early, I guess 3/4 day schedules, however you want to put it, I was wondering if I understand all of the complications with going from what is now to a full day at the various levels. But I was wondering if there's, say we kept the spacing as it was, is there kind of a plan going forward, thinking not specific dates, but is there a plan going forward about how we would eventually change that to full days if the health data supported people having lunch in the schools again? Is there a kind of a path going forward for that, or is it just can't be done?
No, I don't want to say anything is impossible. We haven't found the answer yet. And certainly what we don't want to do at this point is add to the load on our staff right now.
Mhm.
That's just not doable. Anything we do, we're fighting really hard to alleviate the load on the staff right now. So, you know, if we were to, for example, just say, we're just going to add the 2 hours, we'll just go back to the regular schedule. That means every teacher really has to run their classroom on their own. And those of you that have been observing, or those of you who have children who are in the classes, I think you see how important those are to the teachers right now. If we, you know, we're trying to get everyone used to the system. We have professional development coming up where we're going to have staff share their best practices with one another. I can't predict that in a month from now, teachers will be so comfortable that they don't have to have a facilitator. I couldn't say that that's true. I don't even know if that is possible to be true, but something like that would need to be necessary for us to be able to reallocate staff. It is, of course, you know, as we evolve, we're trying to work to a point where it is a gradual release system. Is there a way that we can manipulate the schedule or help staff? We don't know the answer to that yet. We are investigating everything that the staff is bringing to our attention. Chrissy's observing classrooms and getting an overarching view of what's happening in different schools that she can bring. We're all working on it, honestly, every single day right now, because our primary goal is to make this more manageable for the staff while keeping up the level of rigor for the students. One thing I will tell you, for example, is that the Commissioner of Education this week announced that he is auditing schools now. Now that it's in session, 16 districts have been chosen for audits. One of the things that we believe that he's looking at next is any teaching that is done without being on screen with a teacher. So they're calling it asynchronous. We know it's a little different in our district, but that's what they're looking at next. As uncomfortable and difficult as it has been for everybody so far, Chrissy and I feel confident we could pass that right now, no problem. Whereas other districts who have other things in place that maybe their staff feels really great about it, well, they're going to have to upend all of that when they're audited, and they're going to have to change things. So it is difficult, but fortunately, you know, there are some things we don't feel like we'll have to upend our teachers anyway, but we're not going to stop until we make this as best as we can for everybody. It isn't going to be normal. It's just not. There's nothing's normal. What's normal? You know, I can't even go to the ladies' room without, it's not normal. So we all have to come to the realization it will not be, and it just won't be what it was last year. It just will not. But we are doing our best under those circumstances, and we will continue to try to make it as palatable for everyone as possible, because if our staff burns out, then what, right? Then that's not effective. So we are continuing to work on that, but what we don't need is an audit. So for example, you know, we're having our staff work remotely, majority of them working remotely on Wednesdays. That would not pass an audit. You know, we don't want to encourage an audit of our district.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was reading that as well, and I know that they're first looking at districts that are doing fully remote, even though their numbers don't support that. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
So what does that mean in audit? Like what could they do if they decide District A, you should be having a hybrid plan, but you have fully remote? What is it that they would?
So we go through many audits on many different things, and the trajectory of an audit is that they send a team down. It completely ties up administration and our staff for days on end.
Yeah.
Nothing gets completed except coming up with reports and presentations for them so that they can make a determination. And it almost always ends with some form of either a blessing to continue or corrective action. Corrective action has a time limit on it. They give you a certain number of days to do a certain number of things, and then they check in again, and they continue to do that until the corrective action is finished. And so that is not something we wish to engage in at this time. And I honestly believe our first priority is to go above and beyond with safety.
Right.
And so I realize, you know, the education is not, it isn't perfect right now. It's not perfect anywhere. But what we've really been focusing on is the safety. And I feel confident about that. Now we're focusing on the delivery of instruction and how can we make it more manageable for staff. We feel as though the quality they're offering to the students right now is above and beyond what we're seeing in other districts. And so I guess my bottom line point is we feel confident that we will not be affected by the upcoming audits that are happening in the state, that even if we were chosen for an audit, we feel comfortable that what we're doing is above and beyond what other people are doing. So, you know, while some people are seeing, well, X district is doing this and Y district is doing that, it doesn't mean they're going to continue doing that.
So what if they, so for example, so what if we don't have, if we decide to stick with the 6 feet and we can't accept some of the remote students back because, you know, we have, as you said, we have space limitations, we have personnel limitations, we certainly have funding limitations. Could DESE come in and say, nope, you need to go to 3 feet. That's your corrective action?
Okay, that's a great question. And if people were to be completely unsatisfied with their children not being able to come back, and they did contact DESE, it is possible we would get an audit. If our numbers stay where they are in terms of cases in the district as well as in our community, it is entirely possible that corrective action could be, you need to go down to 3 or 4 feet and have more students in your building. That is possible. Because that
To
is
me,
their
it's just,
current
it's
recommendation.
unbelievable that they, you know, every district is different, make your decisions based on your district, but if you do something we don't like, then we're going to come and use up all your resources and tie up your time. And
Well, it's very interesting you say that because we heard many colleagues say the same thing, verbatim, basically. We do appreciate that we do have local control and that we've been given local control by the commissioner. The important thing to remember is that the commissioner, like me in the school district, the commissioner for the state does not work in a silo. He has people that he answers to,
Mhm.
he has people that he works in coordination with and that he has to satisfy. And, you know, I know he is a big advocate of local control, but it is not all about what he as an individual wants. And so I know he has some constraints on him that, you know, he has to pass on to us.
Mhm.
So I think that is a fantastic question, Jackie, because that is entirely possible, especially when, you know, anything different than what the district, what the commissioners council is recommending, they keep saying needs to be substantiated with data. And the fact is that the data in Easton and in the Easton Public Schools is among the lowest in the state. And I believe we would be hard pressed to toe that line if it were challenged.
Even though it's probably that way because of the protections we've put in place. Yeah, okay, I got it. It's very frustrating, and I know it's very frustrating for a lot of families. It's frustrating for me too. It's, you know, we all, some of us have kids in school, some of us are teachers, you know, we have family members that work in, this is just, it's very frustrating. And so.
We are finding though, if we look back, that the CDC, you know, obviously they're a national organization.
Mhm.
And so they are, they have a different lens when they're creating their guidelines. Massachusetts is an anomaly. It was one of only 6 states, now one of only 9 states that is considered lower risk in the entire country and territories of the United States. So we can look at things a little bit differently here. While I'm not advocating 3 to 6 feet as opposed to 6, I'm just saying that we have found that they have sort of played catch up with us in a couple of areas. One, for example, being the information that was released yesterday. We had a lot of questions about people saying, well, wait a second, CDC changed the definition of close contacts. Are you changing that in your district? That is the fact of, so the definition of close contact being less than 6 feet apart from one another for more than 15 minutes, including the fact that 15 could be cumulative with one particular student or colleague. We've been doing that in Massachusetts from the beginning. So that is not different for us. So there has been a lot of national news and national media attention to the fact that CDC changed their guidelines, but Massachusetts, our plan, what we have done, our identification of close contacts to date has always been with the cumulative 15 minutes. Now, the research I'm not saying how I feel personally or anybody else feels personally, but the research is showing that 3 to 6 feet does not show a higher transmission rate, particularly in schools that are not seen as super spreaders at all, than the 6 feet. So is the CDC at some point going to catch up with that research and also recommend 3 to 6 feet? Of course, I don't know that, but we have seen that sort of trend so far from the CDC to the state level, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Caroline?
I just have to say this whole issue of, you know, the 3 to 6 feet or where do you draw the line is so complicated, because there is also a lot of research that says 6 feet isn't even long enough a distance to keep people safe. So, you know, it's all over the map. It kind of, I think when there are various research approaches that may include biases toward, you know, wanting more opening up or wanting more flexibility for schools. So it's a little confusing, because there are some really great entities, you know, major universities and so on, that are still sticking with the 6 feet too, very firmly. So I agree that there seem to be some studies that indicate schools are not, well, they're not super spreaders, but I happened to see this great comment earlier in was actually about a research study, but it was talking about it being very important to distinguish between COVID in your school, which is bad, not being the same thing as COVID being transmitted in your school, because there are always going to be some cases that crop up, but almost the vast majority are from people that have been infected in the outside community, not in the schools.
Right.
So it's very frustrating. In fact, this is pretty harsh, but I loved this quote. This was from a doctor who has been working straight through for 214 days in his state. It's one of the states where there've been a huge unrelenting spike. And he's the head of a medical center there. And he said, I'm fighting 2 wars. I'm fighting a war against COVID, and I'm fighting a war against stupidity. And that is, I know it sounds harsh, but you know, he was talking about the fact that in their particular area, the main reasons for spread, like they've had to close the schools, open the schools, close the schools, but the kids are not being infected by the school or in the school. They're coming to the school, having been infected in the community, as he said, and mostly from, this is sad to hear, parent-sponsored youth events. Events that parents, you know, I want my kids to be kids. I want them to have a party. I want them to be able to socialize. We all want that for our kids, especially our teenagers. But the problem is that will undermine our efforts to keep the schools open and to potentially become more flexible in our guidelines. I mean, I'm not ready to give up 6 feet myself at this point, but I do realize that there seems to be increasing evidence that the key certainly is much more masks than the actual physical distancing. So, but I appreciate the fact that you're looking at all of this so closely and planning ahead. I mean, you're right, it's going to be January in the blink of an eye. So we need to be prepared. And unfortunately, you know, looking at the rest of the country, and as you mentioned, the rest of the world, it's hard to be optimistic about things loosening up, but we shall see.
And we realize the entire conversation could be moot if things are closed. But what we don't have the luxury of doing when we're trying to serve so many people that need to make plans for their families and for themselves. We don't have the luxury of waiting until January and saying, oh, gee, it's not closed. Let's come up with a plan now. So unfortunately, we have to come up with some contingency.
But in terms of your concern about an audit, I honestly think the all remote districts that are in green communities are going to be a strong focus initially. I don't think we're going to be given a whole lot of attention, at least not at the outset.
Go ahead, Chrissy.
So one of the things that was discussed at our meeting, we met with superintendents and assistant superintendents, and the director of MASS, Tom Scott, was there. And he had shared with us that this is what the commission, these are the audits that they're focusing on now. What's next is the comparison of what kids are doing when they are at home. And he said, and I actually clarified, I said, do you really think this is coming, or is this just mumbling? And he said, yes, it's coming. And so Leisha and I discussed that we are very confident. You know, I see what's going on in other districts. I live in another district. You know, many of our teachers live in other districts. The quality of education that some kids are getting at home is not the quality that is happening in Easton. We know that this model is extremely difficult, and I've been observing it, and it is tough. It is really hard, and our teachers they're doing amazing things, and they are literally, they're like magicians and magical, but they're exhausted, and it's an extremely tough model. We're seeing emails from superintendents on our listserv asking for districts that are actually doing this model. There are a lot of districts that are doing this at the high school level, but not all the way down to kindergarten like we are. And they are asking how it is being done. So all of our teachers can teach courses now on this. No, I don't mean to make light of it, but they really are, that's what they're going to be looking at next. You know, we know of districts that the kids have an hour of work at home and then are done for the day, and that's it. And that is consistent. And then we'll have a Google Meet or a Zoom meeting to log in. The teacher takes attendance and they're out, and they go back on their video games, and that's their education when they're at home. We don't have that in Easton. You know, I've observed 3 classrooms so far. The kids are, while yes, they might be twirling around in their rooms and things like that, there's still instruction going on, and they are actually completing work. And for 3-4 hours, and that's, you know, and then they have their break, and then they have activities to do in the afternoon. But this is the model that we are doing. That's where Leisha and I are saying it will stand up to any other, because we feel very confident that if this is looked at, we will actually be 100% okay.
Well, and I know
But we're
just
not
from-
letting up. I'm sorry.
I agree
Go
with that. And it's not to say that we think it's perfect. We're
No.
still working on it.
Right. And we need to make it easier for our staff, because they are busting their tails. They are up all night. You know, we've been, you know, we all know that teachers work outside of educators work outside of their hours. We know that, but they are working beyond that and more. And they have families at home too that they need to attend to, or, you know, just their own mental health. And that is something that we really need to, we're being very mindful of that and understanding and trying to find ways to make it easier and help.
Jackie, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, I also know just from personal experience here that, you know, when my son turns his camera off and is like walking down the hall to talk to me, I hear his teacher saying, where are you? Turn your camera on. We need to see you. You know, and I know they're dealing with a lot of that too. So that can't be easy as well.
It's like being the ringmaster in a 3-ring circus. It's unbelievable. All right, do you have some more for us, Dr. Cabral?
Yes. Is that all on that? Okay. So the next sort of bucket, of course, is are many questions that we've received and about our COVID notification system, but also the FAQ that I put together and sent out, I think yesterday. It's kind of a blur at this point. We are happy to add to the FAQs if people have questions that they want us to add to that. Those were the most pressing questions that we had received. We tried to answer all that we received, and I think the document pretty much reflects that, but I would just like to elaborate on a couple of things. I know some of it may sound redundant, but I think it's important, and if you have any questions, I want to be able to answer them. So first of all, the process that we're using, I consider it a model in the state, and I really believe that's because of our close relationship with our town and our Board of Health. We literally, Chrissy and I literally talk to the Board of Health 7 days a week, literally, many times a day, sometimes hours together during the day. I know I was working with the Board of Health till about 9:30, 10 o'clock 2 days ago. We start 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. It is a lot of work, and they have been tremendous with us. Everything that we do is with the full support of the Board of Health. We consult with them, and they consult directly with the DPH. They have put forward several of our questions directly to the DPH. We have asked questions of DESE directly, and we've shared that information. And I have to just, I really want to note that, especially because I do, again, have colleagues in the state that do not have that relationship. They have a Board of Health that is not sharing information with them. That has not been our experience. In fact, we have found in almost every case where we think we have a suspected case, we are finding out about things before it's reported in the state system. The state has an electronic system called Maven that we cannot access, but the Board of Health can access. And what happens is when someone in the state is tested, it goes into this Maven system. And then it will report to the Board of Health if someone in your town is COVID positive, if they took a test and they're negative, or if they are considered a close contact. Again, close contact being someone that has been officially identified as being within 6 feet of an infected person for more than 15 minutes, with or without a mask. The Board of Health then follows up with all of those people that live in Easton. They give them supplemental information, they give them advice, they answer questions, they work with interpreters to make sure that all the information is translated appropriately. Now, on the school side, what that equals is the Board of Health will contact us anytime they have someone that is within school age that shows up on Maven, or if they have someone that is reasonably the age of a parent, for example. Or in the course of their interview with the person, they find out that there may be a school-aged person living in the home or would be in close contact with them. So we, again, we find this out every single morning. We check in multiple times during the day usually. We have a thread going where we can ask questions anytime during the day. What we're doing, what Chrissy and I primarily, our function is to really connect our school nurses with the Board of Health. So the school nurses all have an ongoing spreadsheet that takes into account any cases they're following. So this is literally anybody with COVID-like symptoms, displaying COVID-like symptoms in school. They will follow them all the way through to resolution. They will make recommendations that they see their primary care provider. They will look for either results of a COVID test, or they will ask for an alternative diagnosis letter from the doctor saying that they've determined it's seasonal allergies or an upper respiratory infection or something like that. And then they're keeping that documentation. We do not find that kids are falling through the cracks. They're following every student. We keep a running spreadsheet. I notify the Board of Health to find out, are they accurately reporting that they were negative, just to make sure. We have a lot of checks and balances in this system. And anytime the Board of Health reports anybody that shows up in the Maven system, we are then putting that on the sheet for the school nurses. And it's the nurses and the principals monitor that sheet. The purpose of that is so we can make sure that somebody doesn't just show up to school if they're not supposed to be there, that we can advise them of their official return date to school, that we can make sure that if somebody returns to school, they don't then all of a sudden present with symptoms again. So it's a really good check and balance system that not many places have in place. It is exhausting, time consuming. We have 0 staff to do it, but we've made it a priority, and other things are having to take a back seat because of it, because we have committed to every single person that safety is going to be first. And this is part of that pledge. We have had, as I reported in my FAQ, we have had a total of 2 cases of students who attend in the district. 2 different schools, 1 student at each school, 2 different weeks, not related whatsoever. All close contacts have been tested. We have not had any close contact return positive. That is significant because, to I think Carolyn's point prior, there's a big difference between having a case and having a transmitted case. We have had 0 transmitted cases in any of our 6 schools. And that, again, that's extremely important because that indicates a whole nother problem, and we feel as though we're on top of it. I know that there has been a lot of concern expressed about our notification system, and so I'd just like to speak to that for a little bit. What we are doing is exactly what we determined prior to this event in our plan, which then was subsequently summarized in our playbook. And that is to notify anyone who's positive and anyone who's a close contact. Now, I just want to reiterate to everybody, our kids are currently 6 feet apart. Other districts do not report kids 6 feet apart. Official contact tracers do not report kids who are 6 feet apart, because the definition of a close contact is within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. We are reporting every person, staff member or student, that is 6 feet apart from an infected person as an official close contact. So even if somebody is identified as a close contact, it is very important that those people understand, by the strict letter of the law, they are not close contacts. We are doing that out of an abundance of caution. And you saw on the graphic that is in my FAQ that Mr. Bennett made use of today, it is the chance of transmission between people who are 6 feet apart, properly masked, is negligible, even if one of them is positive for COVID. Now, it can alter slightly if the person is actively coughing or sneezing, but we don't have that in any of our classes. Those people immediately leave any room. We also have the added advantage of the HEPA filters, which are designed specifically to capture the aerosol, infection in aerosols in the classroom, and it regenerates multiple times an hour. In addition to that, we have our cleaning protocols, we have our deep cleaning protocols. We just have a lot of things in place that make it actually difficult to contract the virus in the school. In terms of why we only identify those people, there are 2 reasons. One is purely legal and one is ethical. The legal issue, again, I tried to share, there's much more information available, but I shared things that I thought people might have the appetite to read, short, sort of summarized versions of things. The Board of Health has to observe HIPAA. The school department has to observe FERPA. It's our HIPAA, if you will, for education. We cannot be accused of intentionally or inadvertently allowing any person who is positive for COVID to be identified. We just can't. I would ask people to consider themselves, to consider their children. It's not just COVID, it's any communicable disease. Would you want that information out, especially if we're taking into account that any person at any time could have it? It is very important to keep in mind that there are also some ethical implications. And I would like to report that we have not had the unfortunate scenario in our district, but we have, unfortunately. And it does contribute to our decision. It has to contribute to our decision. We have just as much obligation to protect the student who is infected or any close contacts or staff member who's infected as we do of protecting the public. We believe that the safeguards we have in place for the public are effective. We have to make sure that the safeguards for patients are effective also. Unfortunately, in our very limited cases already, we have had some extremely egregious, inaccurate, and unfair accusations made against family members. It is extremely unfortunate, but it has done nothing except firm our resolve that we need to protect these people. I realize there are some that have no idea what I'm talking about because unfortunately I cannot discuss it openly. The bottom line is there has to be an element of trust. And I know that's extremely uncomfortable in a situation such as this, but we are certainly not trying to hide anything. Believe me, I am extremely proud of the fact that we've confined cases to 2, that they are cases that were contracted outside of the public schools. They were not transmitted once they were in the public schools. And we notified everyone involved very quickly so that they could take care of themselves as well. The process we're using literally went off without a hitch. It was tested and then tested again. And both times it was extremely successful. We have been notifying people of their status before the state is even able to notify them. That's how effective our system has been. And so I understand that there is a call to change our policy. I would tell you that in consultation with our entire leadership team, we all feel unanimously that announcing on a weekly basis the number of cases in the district is sufficient to notify people of what's happening in the district. With any data, it's very important, especially people who are very intimate with data know numbers do not tell the whole story. There's always context. And, you know, I would ask people to keep in mind, you know, even data we release doesn't tell the whole story. We could have a student, I could have a student tomorrow that hasn't been in school for a week and 4 days ago was exposed to COVID and then finds out today they're positive and so doesn't come in tomorrow. That means that they were not in school before they had exposure, when they were diagnosed, or after they're diagnosed, but we would still have to report them to the state as a positive case. I don't know how that information helps a parent make a decision because they will not know that that student hasn't been in school because we can't announce that. So I don't know that the numbers really inform people as much as they think it may. Our contention has always been, in the states as well, the state does not, even with MCAS, for example, the state will not release information to us about scores if the cohort is less than 10. If it's N10 or less, they will not release the information because it's potentially identifiable even in an entire district of 3,500 students. Here we have 2. In schools that are vary in size from 170 to 1,130. Parents have demanded to know names. Parents have demanded to know the cohort, the grade, the teacher. We just do not recommend that we release that information. We believe that the value added is in trends, just like with MCAS. We don't look at the final score of a student, we look at growth or lack thereof, and we make adjustments based on that. And the same is true of this. If we were to see a pickup in a trend in any one school, I would absolutely recommend reporting that, because that makes a difference in what a parent may or may not decide to do. I will say, and I hope this doesn't sound dark, but this is evidence-based information. If a parent insists on knowing that a student in their child's school is positive, and they assert that not knowing who that student is doesn't make a difference, that if one student out of 1,000 in their school were positive, they would take their child out of school. I would suggest that they probably should have their student in remote learning right now, because the statistics alone will tell us that there are positive students and potentially staff in our schools right now. But the safeguards we have in place make it so that the transmission is not possible while they're in school. If anyone believes that one positive case in a building is going to affect their child, even though they have not been identified as a close contact, and we are using above and beyond the definition of close contact to notify people, then they need to reconsider and really look at the statistics and understand that it is possible there are students in the school that are undiagnosed with COVID. We know that students traditionally are asymptomatic. It is not common for students to be checked weekly or biweekly. We do have some vigilant families that check their students, or they may be going to a funeral in Maine. And so they're being extra cautious, and they have their student tested when they go, before they go. And then they find out their student's positive. There's no way that person would have known or suspected that, especially if it's before they even leave for Maine. It is extremely unfair to presume, for example, that that person sent their child to school on purpose knowing they were COVID positive. I had a medical procedure this summer. I also donated platelets this summer. For both of those, I needed to have a COVID test. I had no suspicion I was positive whatsoever. I came to work, went about my daily business with my safety protocols in place vigilantly. I was negative for both. If I had been positive though, I would have had close contacts identified. That is not something we can predict. Every time somebody has a COVID test, we have some people that get tested weekly. They can't stay out waiting pending results every single time they take a test. We have to presume, and I've said this before and I mean it most sincerely, I live with a firefighter who's a first responder. I live with a daughter who is a nurse in a hospital. Since the end of February, I have conducted my life as though I have COVID and as though everyone around me is positive. And using those universal precautions, I strongly believe that the universal precautions protect me from contracting this disease. I never veer from them. We are vigilant about it in this office. I am talking to you now, but if somebody even walked down the hall, I put my mask on. I close my door if I'm going to do a lot of talking with my mask off. We have an air purifier in here as well. These are all things that are going above and beyond to try to make sure that we do not transmit or spread this horrible, horrible virus. And I strongly recommend everyone conduct themselves in the same way. We did this back in the 90s when we were giving universal precautions for HIV positive patients. We don't identify who they are. We can't. Statistically, we have them in the district. I don't know who they are. We treat everybody with universal precautions if there's bleeding or bodily fluids. And I strongly believe the same has to be true of COVID. So I just want to make sure we're educating properly. I want to make sure we're not making knee-jerk reactions. And I wish I could tell you that we had 2 situations without incident in terms of them being unfairly treated, but that is not the case. And so we do have to make sure that we are preserving their anonymity while providing information that's actually useful to parents. I don't believe that it's a problem to let people know on a weekly basis how many we have in a district, because I think it's important for people to be knowledgeable. Does what's happening in the schools reflect what's happening in the town, vice versa? There's not a problem with that. But again, and again, I know no one would know this, but I've had angry and hysterical people contact me, you know, threatening that they want names of students, threatening that they want to know the name of a teacher. We can't perpetuate that. We can't give into that. It is unfair, and I don't believe it gives parents the information that is really useful to them. Again, if there is a change, I will be a trend. I will be the first person to recommend that we note that by school. And believe, I don't know how, you know, more transparent we can be. There is no information we have left out, except information that's legally or ethically wrong to give people. That is our recommendation as a leadership team. I talked about it with our entire leadership team. We understand that we will faithfully carry out any policy that the school committee wants us to do, and we will absolutely do that. But that is our professional recommendation to you this evening in terms of changing that policy.
Who wants to go first? Caroline, you want to go first? I'll let you.
I just want to say, I thought that was really explained extremely well. I just wonder, is there any way that we can maybe encourage our educators and our administrators to get the message to some of the kids? I do think part of the problem that was created, and I'm very sorry to hear that you actually received phone calls that bordered on threatening. I think that's just outrageous. But a lot of the stirring up that I think has occurred in the past week was in part because kids, you know, particularly at the high school, you know, you have a lot of chatter and there's a lot of rumors, and they go home, and I think in part they don't have the facts, but their parents may say, so what's going on? I heard there was a case, I heard whatever. And the kids, I do think, sometimes intentionally embellish, because it's so much fun to shock your mom and dad, or to, you know, get them upset. But beyond that, I do think that they're just uninformed. And is there a way to encourage kids, just, you know, if they hear something, don't assume it's true. Don't rush home to your mom and dad and say, oh my God, there are positive cases at, you know, the high school or whatever. Because honestly, by the time the rumor mill started grinding away, you would think there had been multiple positive cases. I mean, you had informed us there had been one positive case, but, you know, the rumor mill, you know, watching some of the posts on Facebook, people were on the verge of hysteria. And they were saying it was because they just didn't know, they needed the information. But I agree with you. The approach in some cases bordered on sort of, you know, it was almost like they were trying to do detective work on Facebook with each other. Well, I spoke to so-and-so, and I talked to so-and-so, and I heard this and I heard that. And it was really appalling, quite frankly. And I think the fact that you are doing exactly what you need to do to protect, to the degree possible, the identity of anyone who's involved, either as a close contact or as, you know, a positive case. I mean, we're going to have positive cases. I agree with you. There are people in the schools now. There's no doubt. I mean, the idea that Easton could be immune somehow from COVID is just, you know, beyond imagining. So I'm just wondering if we can somehow try to encourage our kids. I know it's tough, to be a little more thoughtful, because I do think that has been the source of a lot of the upsetment on the part of the parents.
Certainly we can. The information that we're going to release every week, all students will have access to that as well. I can't speak specifically to Facebook. As you know, that is not something that I monitor or can monitor. So I can't speak to that comment specifically. However, I will say that we can tell students just about anything and we can model for them. But what they see at home and how they see their trusted adults outside of school conduct themselves will completely support or completely eradicate the efforts of the district. And so, you know, it's a great opportunity. You know, if my daughter's 24, she still comes home with shock and awe. If she were to tell me something, you know, I always take the opportunity to say, really, what was your source? Where did you get that from? You know what, let's find out together. These are the appropriate ways you find out something like that, so on and so forth. So yes, of course we can, you know, I'm not sure the source. I don't know that it's our students, but we can absolutely reinforce by giving them information as well. But it is all for naught if they have models of different behavior, which I will say, and I must say, is not the majority of our parents, who are wonderful and supportive. And we're talking about a minority group of people that have called or written or, according to you, posted or something, that are very loud. However, we need to keep in mind, you know, I'm talking to our vast majority of parents who are very cognizant of this and very responsible in how they go through this exercise with their own children. The same is true of you. If you are providing an excellent model for your children, but they're seeing other adults in their life, or they're reading it themselves, either via an email or they hear them on the phone loudly talking to us, or perhaps on Facebook, you know, we tell our kids to trust our adults, and they are always going to learn from us, just like we look at others. We look at our government officials, we look at our friends, and we look at our colleagues and our work peers for guidance on things. And we have some people that we trust more than others. And it's just important that we all keep in mind. I say this constantly, our kids are always watching. They're always listening. When we think they're not watching and listening, those buggers are watching and listening. So it's just important to remind ourselves that even when we're talking to our friends and we think no one's around, certainly you have the freedom to say whatever. I only ask that you keep in mind either public comments or things that are loud in front of students. They hear it, they know, they joke about it. It's not helpful.
Can I just add on to that, if you don't mind? Sorry, I know other people had their hands up. I just want to say that there are parents that have been calling and they've been offering solutions. And I really appreciate that, because they also call to clarify misunderstandings or say, I heard this, can you tell me more about it? I appreciate that so much, because we are able to have direct conversations with people rather than people complaining on, you know, amongst friends or on a social media site or anything like that, that can add to the confusion. We really appreciate the direct conversations. So I would encourage families to continue doing that. We've been taking calls, we've been answering emails. So please, I encourage them to keep doing that. And we're very thankful for that.
And that is a model of effective communication. I would purposefully try to do that in front of my kids, to show them how we go about, you know, getting first person accounts and contacting knowledgeable parties for specific information.
Michelle, did you have your hand up? Michelle? No. Jen? Jen?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and they're definitely tied together and related to what you just said, actually, about knowing the right source to get first person information. So I think the one area of opportunity that I see is that there isn't right now an easily accessible way to get that source info, right? So say there's kids hear something, or there's a rumor that goes around on a Monday, and I'd like to hear more about what the channel and the frequency of the weekly update will be. But say the weekly update comes out on Thursday, there's no way for a parent easily to say Monday afternoon to their student, or Tuesday, say, when the rumor is there are 5 kids with COVID and somebody else came in today and had to be sent home because they were positive. And those were the rumors that were going around. There's no easy way to go, no, actually the case count is 1 as of yesterday. And if it were different, then this, whatever the source would be, would say 2 or 5 or whatever, but it doesn't, it says 1. So what you heard is not accurate, and let's move on. So that's the only place where I see an opportunity where more frequent reporting or having something like that that's updated in more real time might be beneficial versus
So-
having to field multiple phone calls or,
The problem with real time or even daily reports, and I know people have told me my district, this district did that. I am well aware. We're talking to those superintendents literally daily. What they may not realize is, though many of those superintendents said, yeah, I did that twice and I'm never doing that again. Don't do that. It's a huge problem. Do not do that. They don't know that side of it. And I'm not going to respond with that to about a specific colleague. Those things happen. It depends where it is. If I said, for example, a staff member at Moreau Hall is positive, it's very easy to see who's the one person that went home today.
Yep.
It's not, you don't need to be a major detective. You have one child that says, Mrs. So-and-so left halfway through the day, or they're working remotely and all of a sudden you see the teacher leave and a sub comes in. It doesn't involve a tremendous amount of detective work.
Yep.
The problem is we can't have one policy for a school that has a large amount of teachers or students and another policy that only has a very few amount of teachers or students. It has to be a universal policy. We will likely post it on Mondays because, again, and it for the week prior, again, because if we did it even on a Friday, if someone were positive on a Friday, it could indicate who that person is. So it's likely going to be on a Monday for the week prior. I understand your point. I really don't have a better answer than to say that's where the element of trust comes in. If there were 5 cases in one day, if there were if there was some sort of crazy outbreak, people would be notified of that. If there was, somebody that feels they're a close contact, but they weren't identified and they call us and we answer them, what is your name? Where are you? No, you were not a close contact, but they insist they're a close contact. There has to be trust. We're looking at bus and van seating charts. We're looking at classroom seating charts. We're calling to talk to staff members to see, did they go anywhere else in the building that day? Because we have logs anywhere. Did they sit in the counselor's office for any period of time? Did they have speech therapy? We check sporting lists to see if they're participating in a sport. We see if they were present. We see who's around them. Again, we go above and beyond those metrics. We see the dates they were present. We measure the amount of time they may have been near each other. Honestly, we are honestly and truly going above and beyond. We have more information than any parent could have, and we're using that to our advantage. If somebody is not contacted, they are not at risk for being a close contact. They're just not. If they were to hear about some crazy outbreak, I would recommend they immediately call their school principal, They're the first line of a person they can speak to. And then the principal, of course, will always contact us because sometimes it's something the principal hasn't even heard. And then they can contact us. Maybe there's something elsewhere in the district they're not aware of, and we can, but they can always reach their principal. Always, they can always reach principal or assistant principal any day. I know I still have an automatic response on my email. I keep saying if I go under 4,000 unread messages in my email, I'll shut it off. I have yet to do that, and it still is creeping up slowly. So unfortunately, I still have that on. I still check email. I just do that so people know if they don't get an immediate response, they're not being neglected. I have prided myself on a 24-hour response time in the 7 years I've been here, and so people are going to think that's the case. So that's really the purpose of it. I still check it, but I have to prioritize the order in which I answer things. Safety is always going to be first, as I said, and I put everything else aside when that happens. So unfortunately, it's not a satisfactory answer to some people, but there does need to be some element of trust there. If they question it, please call the principal. We will answer them anytime. They can leave a message if it's after school hours, and a principal will get back to them first thing in the morning, usually before school even starts. Like we are responsive and we will get back to people. Unfortunately, that's the best answer I can offer because I don't believe it is necessary to tell people about one case in one school that day. I cannot reconcile the value added as opposed to the risk inherent.
Thank you. I guess my only suggestion would be, again, maybe something we can consider going forward would be even if we would be okay, just, and I'm curious just to hear more about what we will be reporting weekly. I know we're reporting at the district level, I think, to DESE. And I think even just having a total count at the district level might be one of those points of, you know what, hon, actually nothing happened because the count's the exact same as it was yesterday. Nobody was added to the list anywhere. Don't worry about it. Let's move on.
Yeah, we don't have the exact format. We wanted to see if we were going to be taking an entirely new tack based on our conversation tonight. But what we have loosely discussed is a chart on our district website, or I can put it in my news. The only problem is the newsletters don't come out weekly anymore. We don't have as much information shared from us as we do from the schools. But I can absolutely add it to the newsletters as well. But a simple chart that is a tally, week of whatever, how many cases, week of whatever, how many cases, and then there's a total at the end. So people don't even have to open separate links or even do math or anything, that would be available. Again, if there were a particular or extraordinary outbreak in any school, first of all, if there were an outbreak in any school, we would likely call in the rapid mobile response unit. That information is available. I've publicized that many times. What that is, it's actually in the playbook as well. It is a resource from the Department of Education. We would not need 15 cases for them to come here. It's a lot smaller than that because of the size of our district. But absolutely, if we met the floor on any of those metrics, I would call them in to do testing throughout the district, and I would announce it to the district. So there's a very low threshold for that. That is, again, in the playbook, if people aren't referred to that. Other than that, that's our reasoning. I understand it may not be acceptable to some. I'm not sure how the committee feels about it. Again, we are happy to enforce any policy that you choose, but that's just the reasoning for our recommendation.
Jackie?
Yeah, and DESE also tracks by district weekly numbers as well on their website. So you can, not by school, but by total for the district.
We report it to them.
Yeah.
And so our data will actually come out a little sooner than theirs
Okay.
does. Maybe that's an advantage, but there's a definite reason that they don't report schools. There's a reason that they report weekly and not daily.
Right.
And It's really for a lot of the same reasons.
No, and I think your explanation was very helpful. And I think it is, it's hard to trust right now because the information is constantly changing. The recommendations from the top down are constantly changing. What we think we know to the next day we don't know. It's just, it's frustrating and it's serious, and we're all scared by it. And I think that's,
We're talking
normal.
about the health and welfare and lives
right.
of our children. I completely understand. Completely.
But I think it's also important for people to recognize that, we have kids in the school too, and we have family members in the school, and some of us are in the schools. It's not that anyone's trying to hide anything. It's just, I think your explanation about why not getting so specific about where the cases are, I think that makes sense, because even though, many of us think, well, of course we would never, ostracize somebody who tested positive or had their family member tested, or, unfortunately that's not always the case. And it's hard enough for our kids these days, just getting through a day without having that extra stigma attached to them, or having people trying to figure out who they are. I think that's troubling. But I agree. I think there has to be some element of trust that our administrators and our teachers and our staff are doing everything they can to keep everyone as safe as possible. And if something comes up, they're gonna report it, and they're gonna let people know. And and we're working with the public health department in Easton, and there's no perfect solution to this. Unfortunately, there's no perfect answer that's gonna satisfy what everyone wants. And so I think we just have to balance trying to keep everyone safe and trying to maintain health, privacy, and protect students and staff. There's just so many different facets of this. I appreciate your explanation, though.
I think it's important to note that while I say we're not reporting it to the district, this is not something that is a judgment call on my own, or that Chrissy and I sit here and we keep it to ourselves. We report cases to the school committee. We report cases to our union leadership. We report cases to our Board of Health. We report cases to DESE. It's not a secret. There are many eyes on it. So, in terms of trusting, you're not trusting one person or two people, Chrissy and I. There are a lot of people that do have more information than we are publicizing, that weigh in on the decisions. As you know, as a school committee, I contacted the school committee, I contacted the Board of Health in very close consultation of whether we were going to release information about which schools cases were in. It is not a decision we make in a silo. So I want people to understand that it may not be publicized, but this is not sort of a personal decision that's made. There's a lot of consultation with medical professionals, with the state, and with our elected officials. There are a lot of opinions weighing in on that. I just think that's important to note.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So now we're going to go to public comment, because I'm sure that there are questions. I hope there are, because people wanted to be heard. So Chrissy, we're going to put it over to you.
So as of right now, we have 2 questions. It's actually one question that's continued, and it actually has nothing to do with this.
Okay.
It's something to do with something that was prior, but I'm sure more questions will pop up. So from Allison Daly, 32 Deborah Lee Lane, I found this meeting turning towards the positive with thoughts of field trips and approving inside music enrichment. Thank you so much for always having our children's best interests in mind. I'm wondering about the declining bump with regards to enrollment you're speaking of with pre-K and K, specifically the low enrollment for full day K. Do you have stats for parents who chose to enroll their child in full day private K in the community versus EPS due to need and access to outside education for this grade level? Furthermore, has there been consideration with regards to costs this year for parents who chose full day K and are only receiving 2 days in person and paying for full day? Thank you.
So that's, I think, two questions. If I miss anything, please let me know. But the first, I believe, is about, do we know how many, about the declining enrollment? The enrollment form that I shared with the school committee that was in their packet, that is public information because it's part of the school committee packet. So certainly that anyone can get that. But I can tell you that on a typical year, for example, from FY19 to FY20, we had 10 less students in kindergarten. Whereas this year we had 78 less students in kindergarten. So you can see it is very different. It's markedly different. It is what we're seeing across the state. It is not unusual at all. We're seeing everywhere this is happening. From FY19 to 20, we had 2 students less. This year we had 16 students less in pre-K. So it's also, you typically see less students leaving as the grades increase, because there's a big difference between a parent trying to help their child through a pre-K curriculum, for example, than through a 9th grade curriculum or chemistry or something like that. So it is not surprising at all that that declined. We do not expect that to be permanent. Certainly, we expect it to go up immediately after COVID. And there's also a phenomenon, a research-based phenomenon, that when you build a new elementary school, your enrollment increases anyway, with people moving into the district and so forth. So we do expect it to not only go back to normal, but to increase in the next few years. But definitely it was because of COVID. Now, how many of those students are enrolled, I think was another question. How many enrolled in private kindergarten or not enrolled at all? That we don't know, because it is not compulsory in Massachusetts. And so they're not required to enroll their children. So we don't keep track of that. We can't ask them to report that information. We don't know that, but we probably won't know that until next year, when the students do matriculate into our system and we are able to do follow-up information just for our own edification going forward, especially if, heaven forbid, COVID were to continue next year. I think the final question was about tuition. I understand that students are in person 2 days. Honestly, the fully remote students are never in person. However, we made a conscious decision not to change the tuition because we still are offering the full program to all students. The tuition is used to pay half of our teachers' salaries, and the operational budget pays for the other half. As you can imagine, we lost a tremendous amount of money from losing 78 students. It had a huge impact on our operational budget. We have been cognizant of making sure that all of our kindergarten teachers have been providing a rigorous level of instruction that does reflect the full curriculum, and they've been doing a phenomenal job with that. And so whether it's in person or online, we believe that the children are getting the best level of education possible, certainly under COVID circumstances. And so we have not changed the tuition. I will bring it back to a prior conversation, and one we've had for years. Our ultimate goal as a district, of course, is to provide full free day kindergarten for all children. That is something we've been advocating. I've been advocating for the 7 years I've been here, and I would imagine it happened prior to that. We will continue working in that direction. But as of right now, we do not have the funding to, every single year I put it forward in the budget, as people may be aware. That will continue to be the case because we do think it's extremely important. So I understand the implications of people having to pay tuition, and it's unfortunate, especially under circumstances like this. We believe every child is entitled to a full and free day education in kindergarten, just like grade 1. Unfortunately, we can't provide it just yet, but I hope that answers all the questions, but please follow up in the Q&A. If not, I'm happy to elaborate further.
That's all we have right now.
Okay. Very good. Superintendent notes?
So I basically have lived COVID, so I haven't really done anything else and don't have a lot to report. I know that Chrissy Pruitt does on the instructional side of things, so I'll let her do that. I do want to note though that October is Principal Appreciation Month. Yes, they get a month. They get a month. Teachers get a week. Bosses get a day. I know people don't think Boss's Day is a day. It's a day, but it's gone. But they get a day. But you know, they're worthy of it. Certainly, educators are worthy of far more than a week. Principals are worthy of far more than a month. But we do want to point out, I did put it in my newsletter, it is principal / assistant principal. There is a week for assistant principal appreciation, but we're folding our wonderful assistant principals in and making sure that they know how much they're appreciated this month. It's difficult. There's a lot less we can do when we're not in person or we're not able to see them as often as normal. But we do want to make sure that we are publicly appreciating our administrators as well. You know, we talk a lot about educators, but the administrators are in there too. They're busting their behinds just as much as the teachers are, and they're keeping everything together as best we can. So we want to make sure that everybody knows it's Principal Appreciation Month. Please, if at all possible, make an effort to extend appreciation to them. Honestly, a one-sentence email goes a long, long way. If you're a parent, you know that. You get a macaroni necklace, it's better than any Cartier diamond. So it's the same is true. We're just bigger students. We're still in schools and we're bigger students. Please reach out with any affirmation that you feel inclined to give to all of our educators, but in October, particularly our principals and assistant principals. So I just wanted to make that acknowledgement and thank them for their service of all of our kids and our other professionals in the district.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent notes.
I just want to start off by thanking all of our volunteers that have been making masks. Jen Starr, our wonderful school committee person here, has been a part of that. And we have delivered over 200 masks to our schools created by this group of volunteers. So thank you so much. I actually was in a school today and there was somebody with a clear mask, and it's just so nice to see. I mean, I know they need it for educational purposes, but it's also just so nice to see their smile and their face. So it's really making a difference. So thank you so much. I want to also just let you know an update on the DJ Henry Day. That is going to be Wednesday, October 28th at the high school. It is going to be an absolute fantastic day, really celebrating the legacy of DJ Henry. We had a training last night through RMK, Raising Multicultural Kids, facilitated by one of Easton's parents, Angela Clark. She's also a consultant, and she brought her partner, Gail Manley. They consult for Fidelity with diversity and inclusion. And they did a wonderful job working with our staff at Oliver Ames. It's a recorded session. School committee, I just actually shared the link with you if you'd like to view it. And it was wonderful. I was there to participate. And the title of the training was Leading Open Conversations About Justice. And we talked about how to facilitate difficult conversations, and really understand as well the emotion that many of our Oliver Ames staff may feel on this day, as many of them had DJ or his siblings in class, and trying to kind of navigate that as well. So it really is going to be a wonderful day. And I just want to publicly thank the Henry family for trusting us with this project. This is really, it's a very vulnerable thing, as you know, as one could even slightly imagine, and they've been wonderful and very supportive with our quest to honor DJ. So I just wanted to share that with you. I also have had the opportunity, as I've been walking through, as Alicia and I have been walking through schools, I had a staff member reach out to me and say, you know what, Chrissy, why don't you come in and see this in action? You know, we worked all summer, as many of you were on the committee, and we created the plan, but actually seeing it in action goes a very, very long way. And I was able to spend an hour in her classroom. This morning, I spent an hour and a half in another classroom and an hour in another classroom. So I'm trying to get through as many classrooms as I can. For those that want me there, I'm trying to say, forget my title of assistant superintendent. I just need to see it, because I need to be engaged in the conversation and walk alongside everyone rather than just preaching. And so it's been really amazing to see. And like I shared before, this is really tough work. I have never, I mean, our teachers are exhausted. They are operating between a class on the screen and a class in person. And we have to remember too, that while the older we get, they do get a little bit more independent. But now think about our youngest learners. And we have 5 and 6-year-olds that the teacher is trying to engage while they are also trying to exercise behavior management to kids on the screen. They're trying to also keep,
Technology.
manage the technology. They have to plan so far in advance and have everything set up so that in the moment, everything works in sync. So, you know, this morning when I was in a classroom, the teacher, you know, Leisha always jokes with us about the 40 tabs she has opened up on her computer. This teacher had about 40 tabs opened up on her computer as she literally went through each one for the morning message, for the breaks. You know, they're doing a ton of movement breaks, thank goodness. And gosh, I got more exercise today in a kindergarten classroom than I have since March. And they are literally, they dove into this work. And they really just need to be commended, because they are creating a model in education that has never been done before. And they're frustrated. They're extremely frustrated because they know what they can do and they are not able to do it. They feel like they're not able to give the kids what they need. And it's extremely frustrating. I was sharing with my hairdresser, I said, imagine trying to cut somebody's hair with 2 broken arms. You could probably do it, you know, by moving around.
Scissors.
But you can't do it in a way that you know you can. And that for our teachers is extremely frustrating, because you all know how great, you know, the education in Easton is. So I just want you to be aware of some of the things. I'm compiling some things that I've noticed. You know, I'm really you know, I'm just kind of, I'd love to come back after I get to more grade levels and just share with you some of the observations. But our teachers really, our educators really need to be commended. And I know that, you know, there are some people that may have criticisms and things like that, but I am telling you, I wish that my kids came to Easton Public Schools. And I say that I've always said, I'm going to start crying. I've always said that I want to be in a district where I want to send my kids. These teachers are crushing it. So I apologize for getting emotional, but they're awesome. And you know, I've just been really, really honored to be there with them and to see your children get the type of education that we know that they deserve. And I hope that the families understand just what our teachers are doing. So we're going to work together. We're going to, you know, try and make it as easy as possible for them, and try and support them as much as possible. And also, just to piggyback off of what Dr. Cabral said, our principals they are also, you know, they're trying to support our teachers. They're trying to give them what they need. They're supporting them not only in the classroom, but emotionally as well. And, you know, this month should be Principal Appreciation Year, because they are doing so much in order to make sure not only our staff, but our families and our students are supported as well. So thank you to all of them. And I can't believe I just cried to all of you, but
Nobody noticed. We didn't notice. What are you talking about?
but thank you. That's my update for today.
I will say, before we lose any attendees, I have two little housekeeping things that I forgot to mention that I think are very important for us to sort of spread around the district. But before that, I just want to, sort of underscore something that Chrissy said. It's easy for a lot of people to, or it's easy for people to think that they understand, the coordination and the technology and the differences that people have to make. But there are some core pedagogical approaches to best practice that just aren't possible in this format. One tiny example is, what Chrissy was saying about the tremendous amount of planning. Yeah, planning's difficult. Planning is really difficult to do a week, 2 weeks ahead, and have everything prepared and make sure that the kids who are leaving in cohort A have what they're going to need when they're home for cohort B. That's a planning issue. Most people can understand that. What most people can't understand, if you haven't been a teacher, is it goes way beyond that, in the sense that one of our best practices in education is being able to make decisions on the fly to suit the needs of your students. I refer to that as being a professional punter all the time. We always have to look at a situation and change it based on the needs of the kids in front of us. And our educators do that masterfully. When you have to plan 2 weeks ahead and the kids at home who left you 2 days ago have the packet that you want to do, but you realize it's really not getting across to the kids and you need to pivot and make a different decision and do stuff differently. And you can't because what you gave them was different than what they have. And it's a nightmare pedagogically. It's a nightmare in the core of teaching. So, I get that people can sympathize on the level of planning and organization and things like that, but it actually gets to the core of our practice as educators. And when we say that they can't do what they want to do, that's like one small example of something like that. At any rate, the two housekeeping issues I have are, first of all, our food service. There's been some rumors going around. Our finance director has been fielding a ton of phone calls that she shared with me today about food service. I guess there's a perception that if people don't pick up the food, we're going to lose the food. That's actually not accurate. We want to increase the use of the food. There's no question about that. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that all our students are getting healthy meals that they can take home, and it increases the user rates in our district so that we as a district don't have to pay off the bottom line at the end of the year. So students taking a lunch and eating it does actually have a positive impact on the district, in the sense that we don't have to supplement under enrollment. So what happens is at the end of a year, if we don't sell enough meals, and in this case, it's considered selling because the federal government reimburses us. Basically, you have to consider this, it's not entirely free. It still is getting paid, the district's getting paid for the meal, but the federal government is paying for it. So it's free for the family, but we are reimbursed from the federal government. So it helps to pay for our food service workers and so forth. So we do need people to increase the meals. However, and there should not be a stigma attached. It's a free meal for every kid. If a student got paid for a lunch in the past, picking up the lunch, just consider somebody's paying for you. That's what it is. However, we are getting information. For example, our director got a call today from someone who owns a farm or something like that, who was asked if they would take meals from the school to feed the animals. That is not what this is for. It does not help us for people to take the meals and then use it for purposes like that. or to donate it to the food pantry. We actually have to be very careful because we have very strict regulations on how long things cannot be refrigerated, on what can be handed over. You know, handing it over once is one thing, doing second person, third person and going. We really don't want to encourage that. We understand the intent is pure and you're trying to A, help us, and B, help an independent business person perhaps, or donate it to a family. If a family has children in Easton, they can get food from us. They don't have to go to the Easton Public Schools. We want to keep track of these families. We want to keep in contact with these families. We want them to come pick up food. We've delivered it when they can't pick it up. But what we don't want to do is encourage people to gather the food and then give it away to other organizations. When we have extra food, we give it to the food pantry. So it's not, we don't have things going to waste. We don't want people to think we have things going to waste. But what we don't want to do is create this inflated need in Easton by, you know, giving it to either other organizations or use for feed for animals or things like that. It's intended for our students to get for their lunches, or if a parent wants to pick it up and use it for their snacks for their child or dinner for their child. But we really need to make sure it's for its intended purpose. There's a limited number of money. There's a limited amount of money in the grant, which is why it was supposed to run out in December. The federal government did extend it to June, but if the money in the grant runs out because of inflated use, then we won't have it for anyone. So there's a balance there. We have to use it for its intended purpose. So we do encourage everyone to come and get the meals, but we ask that it's used for its intended purpose. Now there's another thing called a farmer's box that is not connected to the federal government. It's not connected to the grant. People are coming up and asking for the boxes. We get a limited number of boxes, I think 45 or 50 boxes a week. Those should go to families in need, and we have plenty. So those should not be picked up by people that think it's part of the grant and they can pick it up like a lunch. And if, you know, anybody that's using that for feed or donating it elsewhere or something, it's being taken away from families in need in our district. So there are two different things. The grab and go is for every single kid in our district, whether you go to Easton Public Schools or not. You got a kid, bring them, get food. And we encourage it. It's not based on need. The farmers' boxes are for families in need. And so we do ask that people allow those to be used for families in need. When we have extras, because for some reason there's a week where a parent doesn't pick it up or they say they don't need it, then we do give them out at the grab and go. We say, would you like this box? If we offer it, please take it. We just certainly don't want anything to go to waste. But you know, people are asking for it when they come and get their grab and go thinking it's part of the program. It's two different programs. So we just want to sort of clarify that. Marilyn Gordon is going to be sending out a communication to try to clarify that, but I thought I would take the opportunity to have this recorded that maybe people could refer to it. The second sort of housekeeping item is we're having a huge problem on Lothrop Street in the morning with traffic. The police department has gotten complaints from residents who say that when people are lined up on Lothrop, primarily to turn into Richardson Olmsted to pick up their children, it forces people behind them who are going elsewhere to go around them. The police department is going to need to give people who do that tickets. I think it's very important that we notify people, make people aware that if you go around, you may have done it in the past, you're going to get a ticket from the police department because you're driving into what it's considered driving into oncoming traffic, even though you're passing. This includes our school buses. So what we're doing is we're asking parents to please help us. Please do not show up a half an hour early to pick up your students at Richardson Olmsted and idle in line all the way down Lothrop Street. It's creating a huge problem for us. If our buses have to wait in that line, everybody's going to be pushed back upwards of an hour in terms of getting home or getting to school in the morning. We can't have that. So Mr. Getchell did send a communication asking parents to please not queue on Lothrop Street because you are considered parking there. even if you're idling. The other thing that we think may be helpful, anybody who's aware of this knows that once you go up Lothrop, you take a right into Richardson Olmsted, and you go around the loop. In order to allow a new car to go in, a car has to leave. So the exit is just as important for the approach. The problem is there is a sign there that says right turn only. People are turning left. Again, if you're waiting for cars to let you go, that's part of the problem. We need people to turn right so that they don't have to wait. They can quickly get out, and it makes space for oncoming cars. We have to get the queue off of Lothrop Street. And so again, we had a safety issue at the middle school where people were parking there. So I think it's contributing to this problem, but we really can't have people lining up a half an hour before. Dismissal's been going very quickly. It's been very efficient. So, you know, while you may wait in line to pick up your child, if you're a half hour early, you're really waiting in line. So it would help us a lot. If you could please not queue on Lothrop Street and instead come 5 minutes before you want to pick up your child. The smaller we can restrict that window, the better, because there is no other solution. You know, we're trying to reroute some of our buses. We tried to do that today. Honestly, I've been so tied up with this COVID preparation stuff that I was unable to get a debrief on that, but I will get it first thing in the morning to see if that worked. We're rerouting the buses, so it's going to take them a few minutes longer to get where they need to go to try to avoid it. So if people can help, it certainly would be appreciated. So anybody who can spread that information, your cooperation. I just wanted to explain why we're asking that, because sometimes things don't seem to make sense. And it, you know, you're thinking it doesn't affect you, but in the long run, it certainly might affect you. If your students end up taking the bus, for example, they could be delayed because of something like this. So that's it.
Okay. School committee notes, Caroline?
Nothing, thank you.
Michelle?
You caught me off guard, Caroline. I wasn't ready for that. I'm reading this from Tweet because I want to make sure that I get it right. I just want to shout out to OA. They won the Great Schools 2020 College Success Award for preparing their students and helping them get enrolled in college and success and beyond. And that is a team effort, admin, teachers, guidance. And so I just want to acknowledge that they won that. Congratulations.
Awesome.
Speaking of
Thank-
winning, I don't know if people have been paying attention to our fall sports. They're killing it. They're doing a great job.
Good.
And being
That's
safe. And that is a great, in great part to our athletic director, Bill Matthews, and his extensive plan for that.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Michelle. Next, Jackie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that school committee also received an invitation from an educator to come in and view her classroom. And so I will be doing that next week, and I'm looking forward to it. It's a former teacher of my son's who I love. So it should be a fun experience. And I have seen the hybrid learning from this side of the classroom. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like actually in a classroom. So I just wanted to thank her for giving us that opportunity.
And thank you for doing that. We really appreciate, you know, it's important for us it's important for us in explaining to our teachers that you truly understand what they're going through, and you really can't unless you observe it. And so we appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. Jen.
Couple of things. I just sort of in line with the observations that I'm glad, Chrissy. I know that, you know, you guys have no time at all, but, you know, have been able to prioritize getting into the classrooms. And I look forward to the feedback from Jackie and maybe the opportunity to observe if there is more. Because, you know, I think we're at a point where, you know, we have to understand firsthand. And I don't know that there are any solutions. If there were easy solutions, we already would have implemented them. So at this point, though, I think the message, and I see there are a lot of educators who are logged in today, to just know that, like, we hear you. We know that this is not sustainable. Is probably the message I'm hearing the most from the teachers I know. That, you know what, I'm doing it. I'm proud of the work that I'm doing, but I can't keep going like this and perform at this level for the rest of the year. It can't happen. So I think this is a really important step in figuring out, is it going to be perfect? Is it going to be easy? Is it going to be normal? No, but are there mitigations? Are there changes that can help alleviate some of that pressure and make it feel less impossible? So just want the teachers to know that, we hear you. We hear you. We know it's really hard, and we're looking forward to figuring out what we can do to help make this more doable. A couple things. Christy, thank you for the shout out on the masks. There are more coming. Those window masks certainly take a while, and there are several people who are still working on them. So I'll give a complete list in the future when we sort of have all names, because I don't want to leave any contributors off. But there are quite a few people who are still have those sewing machines fired up, and they're still working through to try to make sure that we can get, especially those window masks, out to as many students and staff as possible who need them. And then, not to be Debbie Downer, but for any of my fellow OA parents who are on, I got to appeal to you, please collectively, let's knock off the socializing that's not responsible among our children. There's a lot that's going on with maskless parties indoors. And this I know of firsthand. I'm not sharing rumors. But you can see from this discussion and every other meeting we've had, so many people are putting their heart and soul into trying to create a safe environment and to let our kids take risks. To be hanging out with large groups indoors at somebody's house just doesn't really make any sense. So I'm begging you, please stop hosting them and stop bringing your kids there. I understand, for people whose kids are old enough to drive, there's a limited amount of control, but there's certainly been plenty of social events with kids who are not old enough to drive. And I'm just asking you, like parent to parent, please, let's collectively work together to just cut it out. We can't keep doing this. Okay. So that's it. Sorry to be a downer, but.
All right. And the only thing I wanted to say, kind of going along with what Jen said, but the teachers are really, and what Chrissy said, doing a great job. But I also want to thank families, parents. You work all day and you're trying to help your kids, and it's kind of a nightmare going on. But please, we've gotten some emails, we've gotten some text messages, phone calls, and I know a couple of the members here follow Facebook and social media and stuff. Just, you know what? Just be cautious, be kind, be cautious, be patient. I don't know what else to say, but keep in touch with us too, because we want to hear from parents and we want it, just like we want to know what's going on with the teachers, we want to know what's going on with you too. Another reminder, please, voting Tuesday, November 3rd, please vote. Maybe some of you have already done your vote by mail or early, whatever. And the next school committee meeting is November 12th, 2020. So, we got a lot going on. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'm sorry.
Oh, Chrissy,
Carol,
go ahead.
Since you mentioned November 3rd, just a reminder to families that is a no school day for children because it is fully a professional development day. So I just wanted to remind everyone that don't expect any remote online work.
The teachers will be in professional development that day. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Wiseman, so moved.
Star
Okay.
second.
Star second, okay. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Grants, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Joe. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Night.
Bye, everyone.